There's trouble. It was Victoria that first alerted me to the dangers ahead. What is it? I asked, half-heartedly listening to what she had to say. There were stacks of invitations on my desk, newspapers I had no time to look through and tea that had long gone cold. It's your Hawk. She paused. He's up to something dangerous, she said. I continued to nod as I inspected the budget for the last quarter of the year. Amethyst, she exclaimed, and I snapped out of Numberland. What is it? I raised my head. It was the first time I paid proper attention to her since she entered the office without knocking. When did you get here? I stretched my arms over my head and bent my neck this way and that. Hawk is up to something, she exclaimed, her eyes fiery. When isn't he up to something? I fought down a snort. Killian had people on him, so if he made a move, they would report it in time. No, this time, I feel it's no joke. He's up to something. She looked frantically around the office, her eyes darting from my documents to my face as if Hawk's agenda would be written somewhere in the room. Do you have any idea what it is then? I asked with a sigh, massaging the point between my brows. It has something to do with you. My fingers paused their movements. What if he exposes you? I think that's what he's up to. What? You mean he's telling people I am a hybrid? My brows furrowed as she bit her lips. I swallowed as a sudden chill spread goosebumps on my skin. He may do that. Victoria nodded slowly. He can do that. It wasn't unexpected, but it didn't make it any less scary. Even when Hawk used to pretend to be good, he never went back on his words. He told me he would expose me if I didn't cooperate with him, and I didn't doubt him for a second, but why now? One shouldn't expect their enemies to be considerate when they launch attacks, but Hawk really chose the worst time to cause another stir. The worst time for me, at least. Don't worry. Even if he exposes me, it won't be unexpected, I mumbled despite the fever overtaking the chill inside me. It was only a matter of time before people found out, anyway. There must be people who suspected me already after the other night. The workers in the palace must have seen Victoria and me together often, and Cedric, who did not bother to conceal himself as thoroughly as he used to in the beginning. And now that everyone knew Victoria was a witch, it was even more likely that I would be found out soon. Amethyst, Victoria drawled, you may not understand the dangers to you, but I want you to think of this seriously, she said. The hybrid hunt among witches is not a joke. I know it isn't, I responded, fighting the urge to pull my hair. You've mentioned it so many times that I've become afraid, but what do you want me to do? I hissed. It's not as if I can hide forever. I am a public figure, you know? I am being watched from every corner, so it's not like I can hide forever. The stress of the palace was getting to me, making me irritable. Hide, Victoria said. Hide, Amethyst. You can't wait till they find you here. My eyes followed her unsettled ones, and together, we looked around my empty office. Jack would be eavesdropping from outside the door, but other than that, there was no one here. Can't you protect me? I asked the woman in front of me. She paled. You were a powerful witch before you went into hiding. Rather than making your daughter hide, you should think of protecting her. Another day, I would go over how selfish I sounded then, but what could I do? We needed as many human resources as available, so if I had to resort to emotional blackmail, so be it. It was better than listening to her impossible advice. Hide? How could I hide? Where would I hide? If I could not protect you then, do you think I can protect you now? She exclaimed, tears in her eyes. The best we can do is... No, I cut her off. Don't say the best we can do is hide. I shook my head, pressing my lips together. How long do you think I can hide? For the rest of my life? Would I need to give up my identity? Wear a new face as you do? Cut off from everyone I know and love? Do you think I want to give up the life I have now and hide away for the rest of my life? Amethyst. Mother, I cut her off, and she flinched. I never called her that. It was awkward to call someone mother, but I did it then, the word slipping from my lips without a preamble. Even if you do nothing for me, I have Killian. I smiled just thinking of my mate. And I can create illusions. It was a difficult ability to master, with Cedric cursing me out almost daily as I failed time and time again to master the basic. I had the ability nonetheless, an ability I could use in protecting myself. It's dangerous, Victoria cried in exasperation. Life in itself is dangerous. I shrugged. This would be the last time we have this conversation. I leaned back in my seat, feeling a headache coming on as I massaged my temples. If you want to do something for me, it would be to hone your magic for my sake. True to her speculations, word got around of my hybridity. It was hearsay as of the next morning, but it was news that spread as fast as fire on a dry bush. By the morning of the next day, there were papers with bold text written above images of me. Some were fascinated, some were scared, and some were hateful, but they were not the ones that mattered. The wolves could only talk about me, but they could not target me. The older covens that abhorred wolves and considered hybrids abominations were going to be the problem. I am sorry, Killian said with a sigh when we had breakfast together that morning. Lately, I feel all I can do is apologize to you. Why? Did you leak the information about my hybridity? I snorted to lighten the mood, but my insides twisted and turned. Hawk's move was expected, but it didn't make it any less frightening. I am sure you imagined none of these when you agreed to be my mate mumbled, his posture stiff and his voice strained. You've been at the end of countless unfavorable rumors, and I cannot help this feeling of regret. I dragged you into all this. Yeah, you did not give me a choice, did you? I puffed out my chest and imitated his haughty expression the day he declared I was to be his fake mate whether or not I liked it. It was supposed to lighten the mood, but it turned out to be a poor joke. Killian, stop it, I scolded when he pulled at his hair, gritting his teeth. You always remind me we are no longer fake mates, but I guess it's my turn to remind you today. I got out of my seat and walked over to him, unraveling the fingers gripping his hair. The goddess paired us together. And I'm not delusional, love. I never thought standing beside you would be all roses and sunshine. After all, you were the most eligible alpha in the kingdom, so there were bound to be jealous people trying to tear us apart. Petty jealousy and Hawk, and quite different, don't you think? He pulled me into his thighs and buried his face in my neck. I am exhausted. All this, it's too much, and half the time, I wonder if it's worth it. He mumbled into my skin. You are suffering all these, and for what? It sounded like resignation. I swallowed thickly through my tightening throat. Hey, Killian, you offered me the seat of the most powerful woman in this kingdom. Don't have any funny ideas of taking my seat away now, I warned, half jokingly. Also, think of Seth. I mentioned his brother, and as expected, he stiffened. Even if you hate this kingdom, think of him. For Seth, Hawk should never win. We are suffering all this to make sure Hawk never gets what he wants, I emphasized. He paused, then sighed again. Would he blame me for wanting a break? Here. Killian wrapped a scarf around my neck. I do not want you getting cold. I gave him an incredulous look but said nothing. The days were getting colder, but not to the point of needing a scarf. Take my jacket. Your face looks pale. He was about to take off his jacket, but I could not keep mute any longer. Killian, we are adult wolves, I reminded him. Only children who hadn't shifted suffered from colds. Let's go inside. I stretched out my hand to him and he took it without a moment of hesitation. My body warmed from head to toe. The palace would be in turmoil now, and it may even fan the rumors of me being an evil witch, but for now, that was not our concern. When Killian said he needed a break, I feared he wanted to quit it all and gallop into the sunset, but he meant a literal break, not giving up. He decided yesterday that we needed a break, and so here we were. I gazed at the villa overseeing the beach and shook my head, remembering Luciano's haven. Killian, I am a fool, I said as we walked into the villa hand in hand. You are not, my mate refuted in a heartbeat. Don't say that again. No, really, I was stupid, I insisted, but my words were met with a growl. Ha, sorry. I flinched at his intense reaction. No one is allowed to insult you. Not even yourself. His tone had an edge of warning, so I could only nod in response to his words. Why would you even say that about yourself? He asked, his tone softening as if his earlier reaction was nothing but a figment of my imagination. I just remembered Luciano's haven, I muttered, holding his hand tighter. Seeing this place reminded me of that day, that's all. Oh. His head turned slightly to the side facing away from me. It was our first date and I ruined it. No, I ruined it. I exclaimed. He went through the hassle of putting everything together to tell me how he felt, and all I could do was deny his words, effectively making him a liar. No, I ruined it. I suspected you did not reciprocate my feeling, yet I ruined the mood. Despite all the coaching I received from Eliza, I ended up doing things out of order. In the end, you could not even enjoy your meal. He shrugged at the end of his words. I realized I loved you and I just wanted you to hear it, whether or not you believed me. I should have believed you, I insisted. You were always good to me, but I made myself blind to the signs. That's why I said, that's why I insulted myself earlier. If I did not purposely avoid the signs, we would have enjoyed the amazing date you planned, but I ruined it. No, it was my fault. From then on, we played a game of faults. I insisted it was my fault our first date was ruined, but he insisted it was his. The argument continued even until we reached our room, ending when we stepped out to the balcony that faced the beautiful blue waters. The argument ended, but I firmly believed the ruination of our first date was my fault, and I had a sinking suspicion that he believed it was his fault. Another day, I would try to make him see how ridiculous I acted then, but at that moment, I appreciated the beauty before me. It's beautiful, I muttered in awe of the sun setting before me. It is, Killian muttered. I turned to give him a smile and caught him looking at me with a soft smile playing on his lips. Somehow, I felt he wasn't talking about the view ahead of us. I avoided his gaze as my insides warmed up. He let out a low chuckle, but I could not bring myself to look at him. I've missed you. He wrapped a hand around my waist and tucked me into his side. We live together. I pretended not to know what he meant. Yes, but I do not see you often enough. The few times I see you, we end up talking about Hawk. He sighed, hugging me tighter. I miss the days when we could go on walks together or when we went shopping together. I miss you. I miss you too. I snaked a hand around his waist. I saw him every day, yet it was not the same. These days, what little time we spent together always involved work, work and more work. If it wasn't Hawk, it was Fraser's wife, the Eliases, and others. There was hardly ever time for Killian, and I missed him. I missed my mate. Hawk has taken too much from us, I added with a sigh. That bastard followed us like a damn shadow. No matter how we tried to ignore him, his matter always came up. Let's not talk about him now, Killian murmured. I am in a good mood now, so let's preserve this mood. In a few days, we would have to deal with him again, so for now, while we are here, let's pretend he doesn't exist. He grabbed my hands in his. You and I, Killian and Amethyst, two parts of a whole. As long as we are here, let's pretend the kingdom doesn't exist. It's just us, ordinary wolves with no titles and no kingdom to shoulder. Okay, I responded with a grin. It was too tempting an offer to refuse. There were staff in the villa, there had to be, but I did not meet any of them. I could only assume Killian had instructed them to be as scarce as possible, so when it was time to have a bath, we went to get the water from the kitchen ourselves, but it was already heated. We helped each other with bathing. Killian dried my hair with a serious expression on his face, as if drying hair was an important task he could not afford to make a mistake with. He helped me comb my hair, tie it back, and then he helped me dress. After dressing, it was time for dinner. The table was set before we arrived, but whoever set the table did not appear after we entered. Unfamiliar dishes were spread out on the table. Killian seemed to know it well as he dug in, so I followed him excitedly. Eatables ranging from lamb stew to unknown dishes to cakes lay spread out before us. I had a taste of everything set out on the table, eager to explore. Good? I nodded at Killian's question as I stuffed my face. Slow down, he exclaimed when I shoved a large piece of cake into my mouth. Who knew that stew and cake went so well together? It's delicious, I answered after swallowing. Then I shoved a piece of steak into my mouth. The food here tasted better than what the chef at home usually made, so I proceeded to eat like a starved thief. Can I have some? Killian asked, and I nodded, stuffing my face with cake without a care in the world. My seat moved and my eyes widened. Fork almost clattering to the ground, I found the space between my mate and I reduced, and in the blink of an eye, his face filled my vision. Then his lips touched mine and a fire burned in my guts. His eyes twinkled as he pulled back while I gaped at him. Yeah, it's delicious. There's a plate right in front of you, I exclaimed, my ears ringing. It wouldn't taste half as good, he said with a shrug while I screamed internally. I looked around furtively, thinking the people who made dinner possible would be hanging around to clear the table. What if they were standing to the side watching us? Oh ho, why are you shy? You've had much more than his tongue inside you. My wolf cackled and I shut her out immediately. Not here. Not in plain view of nobody? The villa was as silent as the night. After that, dinner continued with Killian trying to tease me. We finished dinner and afterwards, we went up to the room, huddled into each other and slept off the fatigue from the long journey here. The next morning, I got served breakfast in bed and I looked at my mate in a new light. Pretending not to have responsibilities was the best. Here, he wasn't the alpha king, just my mate. I didn't need to share him with an entire kingdom. Here, he was all mine. Is that greed I see in your eyes? He poked my nose as my thoughts ran amok. I don't want to share you, I said, determination ringing in my tone. Share me? He frowned. I am all yours. With work. I just realized what I've been missing out on. He burst into laughter as I exclaimed in indignation. No, seriously, I exclaimed. If we could be a normal couple and do normal things like this. We could eat together and spend all day gossiping and go on runs together, but we can't do all that. Then I burst into tears and he recoiled. To my horror, the tears did not stop no matter how much he coaxed. I cried so hard I threw up my delicious lamb stew. Then I felt better, so we went out to the beach, shifted into our wolves and tried to splash each other. I had a good time. We had a good time, but our good time came to an abrupt end when Orion found us. You are hellbent on catching a cold, aren't you? Killian muttered while Kalia whined, unwilling to leave the water. He gathered her into his arms, but my wolf was stubborn. Rather than go willingly, she suddenly moved, pushing him so hard he stumbled. Come on now. He tried again, but Kalia wanted to stay out. I did too, so I quietly laughed at her antics. Kalia, he growled when my wolf trotted back to the water. In the end, he gave in to the temptation of spending more time outside. Outside of the palace, I enjoyed the freedom of being an ordinary wolf, and it was a welcomed reprieve from the constant worry of what was happening or what would happen. Here, I could live as if I had no troubles, no burdens and no responsibilities. I almost wanted to continue here for as long as possible. Spending time with my mate was the best, and it was something we never actually got to do since we got together. Cucumbers? Who likes those? He snorted, his fingers playing on my shoulder. I like cucumbers, I admitted. You have a weird taste, then, he muttered. But I always knew that, so I am not surprised. I laughed at the quip. We spent our second night away from the palace talking until dawn. Despite living together for so long and sharing a bed every night, we still did not know something as simple as each other's favorite colors, so we spent the night learning mundane things about each other. I was falling asleep when the sound of a door opening startled me awake. Considering the quiet we enjoyed aside from the sounds of tweeting birds, the sound of the door opening and closing was enough to startle us both. Hello? It was the unmistakable voice of the beta. Killian? Orion continued to shout until Killian cursed. You should sleep. He kicked the covers off him as he moved. I will handle him. He pressed a kiss to my forehead and exited the room, and that was how Orion shattered our little bubble. Although Killian said to go back to sleep, it was impossible for me to go back to sleep, so I got out of bed, washed my mouth and fixed my appearance before I exited the room. I met a tense atmosphere as I stepped out. Good morning, I greeted them since none of the men noticed my arrival. Ah, Orion stood. I greet the Luna Queen. I waved away his greeting. What's the matter? I asked, taking a seat beside my mate. Killian's face remained unreadable even as he wrapped a hand around my shoulder to pull me closer to him, but I felt the tension around him, so I probed further. What's the matter? It is, Hawk. Orion winced at Killian's growl. I am sorry. I know I was supposed to handle everything in your absence, but things are getting out of hand and there is a limit to what I can do as your beta. What is he up to this time? I asked, despite the bitterness that welled up in my heart. How did this man manage to torment me no matter the distance between us? Even before I met him, his existence hung over me like a dark cloud. As you know, the issue with your identity. Orion chanced a glance at Killian before he continued. He came out to claim you. My jaw slackened in horror. A coven reached out to me and they are requesting, no, demanding we hand you over. It was as I feared. Would this be the beginning of a new hybrid hunt? Also, there has been an increase in rogue sightings and worst of all, Orion paused to gather his breath, then he burst out, "The oracle has gone missing." That part made me blink. "What?" I stuttered, and he took a deep breath. "How? When? What?" "She was scheduled to arrive at White Crest Pack in the east a while back, but it has been 3 days since anyone last heard from her. They sent a message to the temple and the temple reached out to the palace, but since yesterday, I have sent out search parties and contacted as many alphas as I can, but there is no trace of the oracle." Orion bounced his knees. "I am sorry I had to cut your vacation short, but things are not good." "Not good" was putting things mildly. Things were terrible. How could so many things go wrong in the short while we were away? Serena. She was my friend. She took a step out of the temple after so long, all because of me. Although she often threw me off guard with her words, she went to such lengths to prove my mate's legitimacy because I asked her to, and now, Hawk may have her in his palms. Anger burned hot in my chest as I thought of that bastard's ugly face. He had a lot of cards up his sleeve. It was no wonder he abandoned his daughter so easily. He had his moves calculated, and she was already an ignorable card to him. "I am sorry we have to return," Killian said as we returned to our room. Orion went to prepare the carriage for our return to the palace earlier than we planned. My lips pursed on their own when I imagined the palace. At one time in my life, the palace was not a place I could even dream about entering. The luxurious home of the Alpha King and his queen was a place most people coveted and hoped to see at least once in their lifetime, but now, to me, it had become a suffocating hellhole, a place that filled me with dread and annoyance just from thinking about it. "You can stay back for a while," Killian grumbled. "I will get things sorted so you can stay for as long as you want." Even as he spoke, I could see the reluctance in his eyes. His face brightened when I shook my head. "Don't forget we are mates." He smiled but frowned after that. "I am sorry for making you suffer like this." His frown deepened. "Things would be simpler for you if..." I cut off his rambling. "We are mates," I said with a glare. "None of this is your fault, so stop apologizing. We are in this together, so let's leave quickly. We have an enemy to face." He cracked a smile. It was a small, tiny smile, but it was a smile nonetheless. Killian entered work mode as soon as we boarded the carriage. Orion filled him in on what we had missed, and document after document entered his hands as we went. The calm and free atmosphere surrounding him yesterday seemed like a lie compared to the stiff air around him then. As if feeling my gaze burning into his profile, he raised his head and his stiff expression transformed with a sweet smile that made my heart skip a beat. He chuckled before going back to work. His smile not only warmed my belly, but it also gave me reassurance. It didn't matter the problems we had to face now. As long as I had Killian, the future was certainly bright. 1,001 men like Hawk may arise in the future, but as long as I never lost Killian, as long as I could see his face and watch him smile, then I think I could withstand them all. I never trusted anyone as much as I trusted Killian at that moment. As he worked with furrowed brows, I felt a certain peace in my mind, as if Hawk was done for already. Killian would take care of him. It was the infinite faith in the Alpha King that I once mocked my wolf for in the past, but I felt it then. When we arrived at the palace, Killian and I went our separate ways. "You must be tired, so take a bath and sleep, all right?" he said, kissing me in plain view of the welcome party. "I may not join you for dinner tonight, but we will have breakfast together like usual." I nodded and he smiled again before he left with Orion. Although he asked me to rest, it was impossible for me to. As he went to the Emerald Annex, I took Eliza and Jacqueline to the office. "Welcome back," Eliza said, her tone tinged with nervousness. "Do you need anything? How bad is it?" I cut to the chase. It's not so bad," Eliza muttered, but Jacqueline scoffed. She had a bit of blood on the side of her lips and it looked very, very fresh. "Have you been fighting?" I asked, and she shrugged. "You are lucky to have a guard who defends your honor as I do." She puffed out her chest. As if things weren't bad enough, the next day, we received a report from Scarlet's special warden. It said that she was acting deranged, hitting her head on the ground despite being docile since she was taken in. She refused her meals, and for the past 2 days, she had shifted into her wolf and refused to shift back. "Someone is making rogues," Eliza said, after scanning through the stack of papers set out in front of her. "There have never been these many rogue sightings in a long time." Even before the war on rogues, rogues did not just pop up as much as they are doing now. She bit her lips in concentration as she picked up another paper to skim through. Is it possible to make rogues? I asked, going through the paper she just discarded. The paper reported the recent rogue sighting in the capital, the 7th this week. Underneath it, there was a clear question asking for Killian's thoughts. What has the Alpha King got to say about the increase in rogues in the kingdom? The question made me frown. Aside from being too forward, it gave the impression that Killian had something to do with the increase in rogues in the kingdom. I am not certain, but in the past, there were studies that tried to connect the abuse of Wolf's Bane with roguish tendencies, but with the decrease in rogues and the strict control of Wolf's Bane, the study was later abandoned, Eliza answered. Jacqueline lounged on a seat, sheathing and then brandishing her claws. Her gaze raised when she felt my gaze on her. I am a little bored, she defended her weird behavior with a shrug. Do you think Wolf's Bane can make rogues? Of the three of us here, she knew the most about rogues, after all, she had fought in the battle against rogues. I don't know, she shrugged. Rogues are crazed wolves, and although people lose their senses when they are exposed to Wolf's Bane, I don't think it's to the extent of going rogue. Still, I believe there is something wrong with the way rogues keep emerging out of thin air. Jack and I agreed with Eliza. After all, rogues were found right here where we lived. A place known as the most secure place in the kingdom somehow had rogues taking a walk in the forest. That evening, Killian finally got time off work. He entered the room as I dried my hair, preparing for bed. You are back. I could not stop myself from rushing into his arms. He staggered back as I barreled into him, but he caught me, wrapping his arms around me as I buried my face in his chest. For an insane second, I felt tears well up in my eyes. I missed you. I hummed in response to his words, hugging him tighter. He pressed a kiss to my hair and my heart tickled. How was your day? He asked, shrugging out of his clothes. Unremarkable without you, I answered, and he laughed. Did you meet Scarlet? His smile fell when I asked the question bugging me. Since I heard of her weird behavior and Eliza's speculation of someone making rogues, I wondered if it was true, if it was possible that Scarlet was turning rogue. I stepped by the dungeons this afternoon and truthfully, she doesn't look good. I frowned when he frowned. Then he sighed and I bit my lips, worried about the tension tightening his shoulders. Is she going rogue? I asked, cautious of my words. He flinched but then shrugged. She doesn't seem sane, but we cannot say for certain that she has gone rogue. In a nutshell, her eyes were still the same. Soulless black eyes were a trademark of rogues, so if her eyes had not changed, she may just be going crazy from being locked up. I helped my mate wash his hair as he took a bath. He leaned his head back, his eyes closed and a peaceful look on his face. Have you had dinner? I asked. His eyes fluttered open and I was caught in his ruby-red irises. The side of his lips lifted and I shivered, feeling my guts warm. Will you feed me? His words dipped low and I bit my lips. I asked that question to stop myself from asking about Scarlet and the many things going wrong in the kingdom. He worked hard all day and I felt it was wrong to discuss work when he was to be resting, but he didn't look like he wanted to rest now. No, he looked both hungry and invigorated at the same time. Sure, I'll feed you. I forced my voice to come out stable despite my insides melting from his hot gaze. What would you like to have? I asked and he laughed, grabbing my hand and kissing the inside of my wrist. Do you even have to ask? His eyes, filled with tiredness a minute ago, sparkled, full of life, as he got out of his bath. My mouth went dry when I faced him in his full glory. I helped undress him a while back, but something about having water dripping down his muscular body made me feel thirsty. Will you dry me? I blinked in wonder as a white towel entered my vision. When had he moved? Yes, I nodded, swallowing thickly as I accepted the towel and proceeded to dry him. I felt the heat of his body as I touched him, pretending not to see his reaction. I think you missed a spot. His eyes twinkled as I made to discard the towel. My skin heated when he motioned downwards. Aren't you tired? I muttered, shaking my head. You should rest. Haven't you noticed I sleep better after I've been inside you? He asked, and all thoughts of leaving my tired mate to rest flew out of my mind. I woke up before him the next morning. It was rare to open my eyes to my mate in bed beside me, so I savored the sight when I opened my eyes. He looked peaceful as he slept, his usually furrowed brows relaxed with his lips slightly parted. I pushed his hair out of his face to better admire him and his eyes blinked open. They took a second to focus and the disoriented look in them made me smile. He mirrored my smile as he stretched. "Good morning," I greeted and he responded in a hoarse voice that had me warming up from head to toe. Then my eyes watered. What was wrong with me? Why were my emotions all over the place recently? One minute I was ecstatic and comfortable and the next, I felt like bawling my eyes out. "What is it?" he asked in alarm when I wiped tears from the inner corners of my eyes. "You are beautiful," I choked out and he burst into laughter. "No, seriously," I insisted but he continued to laugh. After my little emotional moment, we had a bath together, dressed together and went to his office together. There we had breakfast together and then I had to leave for my own work. Compared to Killian, I had nothing to do but although the work of running the palace was not as pressing as the work he did, it was not something I could abandon to stare at my mate as he worked. I was about to leave when Orion entered with panicked eyes. "Killian," he exclaimed as he entered but paused when his eyes fell on me. "Your Majesties," he cleared his throat as he paid his respects. "What is it?" I asked on behalf of my mate. Orion's gaze darted to Killian who growled. "Are you deaf? She asked you a question." My mate snapped and Orion's spine straightened. "Ah, yes. Of course." He nodded. "See this." He handed me a paper and my face went white from reading just the front page. There was talk about the recent rogue sightings, talk of my barrenness and hybridity, but boldly written at the top of the paper was the caption. "A blessing or a lie? The story of the red-eyed king. Find him," Killian growled. "Find whatever bastard that still dares call my mate barren." He snatched the paper from my hands and tore it up. But, Orion frowned. "That's not the main point," I exclaimed. "It's happening. The security I felt earlier vanished. It's just like my dream. They are discrediting you." My stomach turned and the breakfast I just had threatened to come back up but I held my breath, counting to 10. Would it happen as it did in my dream where Hawk gained the upper hand and made my mate the villain in the eyes of the people? Would people actually believe that Killian and his ancestors were never blessed to rule over wolves? Who would believe? Killian started but a knock on the door cut him off. The peaceful and beautiful morning quickly turned into a disaster when news of Scarlet going rogue reached us. "Killian. He will continue to go after her," Orion said and I laughed without feeling an ounce of joy. "He has found my weakness," I muttered and my beta nodded. I did not consider Amethyst a weakness. She was more like a treasure I would give anything to guard. "I have increased the number of guards around her to ensure her safety," Orion said. "Without a doubt, he is targeting her but we won't let him have her." Hawk. I spat the name like a curse. Everything was going wrong because one man wanted this throne. In the first place, I did not even want it but I was the last of my lineage, so there was no one else to pass it on to. My eyes skimmed through the papers in front of me. The witches, who we all knew were in hiding, had even been dragged into all this. The paper in front of me, as if mocking me, proclaimed my mate infertile. "We have heard from credible sources that hybrids cannot have children. Doesn't that mean that the Luna Queen is accursed us? If she cannot give us an heir, then she should step aside to prove she is not trying to destroy the monarchy." Surprisingly, despite people saying the goddess never appointed my ancestors as kings, this paper still tried to slander my mate by talking about the continuation of the monarchy. It was not the only paper to do so. Another paper had what they termed a revelation, with a witch that discusses how it is impossible for hybrids to have children. With a swipe of my hand, I sent all the papers on my desk flying. "I have a headache," I murmured. "I've had a headache since I ascended the throne. No, this headache started when my father died and the kingdom became my responsibility." "Shall I call the physician?" Orion asked but we both knew it was not something the physician could help with. "I am constantly tired," I ignored my beta's words. "And for what?" "Killian." His tone had a hint of warning. "How impetuous," my wolf sneered. "If I let everything burn." "Killian." Orion called again. "I would be the bad guy." I scrubbed a hand down my face. For Seth, I bore the burdens of this kingdom. Ruling this kingdom was a divine duty, one my brother never shied away from despite how much he hated it. I tried to be like him, to honor his memory, but between Seth and my mate, it was clear who was more important. Amethyst was suffering. No matter how much she smiled and pretended not to be hurt by the dirty water constantly pouring on her, I knew better. Who would not be hurt to be called barren, evil, a curse, and whatnot? They were hurting my mate and even putting her in danger. Amethyst won't want you to be a bad guy. My wolf growled at Orion's corny words. What rights do you have to speak her name? He shrank back as I growled, my eyes burning with hatred and anger. A part of me knew my anger was misguided, knew that Orion was an ally and not a foe, but rage messed with my senses. People were insulting my mate and I could do nothing. I was supposed to be the most powerful man in this kingdom, but I could not protect my mate from the words stabbing her from every corner. I felt weak, powerless, like my hands were tied behind me and I could not break free. I am sorry, Orion backtracked, but I was no longer thinking of him. But Her Majesty surely won't want you to do anything rash on her account. Despite how you feel, she clearly said yesterday that none of the words matter, so no matter how you feel. Stop. My fist slammed into the desk, and if it was another man, if it was not my best friend and Beta, it may have been impossible for me to rein in my wolf. Do not speak as though you know my mate better than I do. All right, Orion said in resignation. It's distasteful. He nodded at my words. I was angry, frustrated and getting irritated. What is Hawk's most prized possession? Even as I asked, I thought of Dark Moon, his pride and joy. The Hawk family ruled over Dark Moon since its inception. Over the years, the alphas of Dark Moon started to get arrogant. They acted like they were above the Alpha King and were leaders of an autonomous land. My father, the incompetent bastard, it was during his reign that Dark Moon finally grew wings to fly. Under his nose, they started to act out, but he never did anything, never even paid attention. That woman, Orion began, pulling me from my thoughts. He seems to have a weird fascination with her. What woman? I frowned. Hawk was too self-absorbed to pay attention to anyone. From his mate to his daughter, everyone was a tool to him. Grace from Red Lake. I frowned as Orion spoke. There are rumors that the two are involved with each other. Doesn't she have a mate? Red Lake was a small pack which I ordinarily would have never found out about if my mate did not run from them. They had an alpha who was still well and living, so how could his mate be involved with someone else? They are not true mates, and from what I have gathered about her, she has a habit of clinging to powerful men. Then grab her. What? My Beta frowned. I don't think a man like Hawk would care much for a person other than himself. Hawk was too prideful, too cruel, to care about anyone but himself. But if he has even the slightest bit of interest in that woman, then grab her. I am about to take everything from him. Because of him, people called my mate barren. He exposed her hybridity and put her in danger. Because of him, people said she was bad luck, a barren woman who was an evil witch that caused the recent outbreak of rogues in the kingdom. I had no proof yet, but I knew he was behind the rogues cropping up everywhere. He had to be. How is Scarlet? I asked my perplexed Beta. She is still the same, he responded. She should have been executed earlier, but then she went rogue. We have tried all treatments, but she is not responding to any. Let her suffer her fate. But, Orion started, his mouth agape. How can we? How many rogues respond to treatment in the first place? Not even as many as 1% of rogues responded to treatment, so no one expected Scarlet's case to be different. Just make sure she doesn't die. Alone in her cell, she is attacking herself, Orion muttered. Chain her with silver. That way, she would not be able to claw at herself. Chain her hands and legs. Sew her mouth shut with silver if you have to, but make sure she doesn't die. May I ask why? She has to suffer. I grinned as Orion flinched. And I want to see Hawk's face when I rip her apart. He may not care, though, my Beta said, but I shrugged. Either way, she suffers. Hawk and Dark Moon take a hit when their rogue successor is publicly executed. All in all, it will make me happy. If that is what you want, he mumbled, and I nodded. It was one of the few things I wanted. My ultimate goal was to humiliate Hawk. It was no longer enough for me to thwart his plans or beat him. Before finishing him off, I wanted him to lose every shred of dignity he ever had. To screw Hawk, I had to go after Dark Moon. They were the source of his power. All this time, I held myself back since Dark Moon controlled a large network in the kingdom, but it didn't matter much to me at that moment. It didn't matter who fell, as long as Hawk fell with everything. I greet your majesty. Alpha Bale entered after Orion. I have completed the report you entrusted me with. I grinned at his perfect timing. Did you find the culprits? I did a thorough job. I think your majesty would be pleased. Bale looked pleased with himself as he handed over his findings. Interestingly, he did do a thorough job. I did not start any of this, but it was my duty to end it all. What if things end up the same way they did in my dream? It was my greatest fear, so I sent word to Crystal and Cedric, who I hadn't seen in a while. Thankfully, they made out time to see me even though my request to meet was quite impromptu. So that was my dream, I explained to them. My mother also made an appearance. The two women looked paler than they did when they entered, but Cedric still maintained his usual nonchalant expression. I just want to know if there is a chance to change the future. I could not help but wrinkle my dress as I clutched at it. Well, Crystal was the first to speak. I have known from Cedric about your dreams, and although no one in my memories has such abilities, I can tell you that the future is not set in stone. Wasn't that a cliché expression used to give people hope? I needed something more definite than that. What you have dreamt is a possibility, Victoria said, but as the present changes, the future is also certain to change. Yes, a part of me knew that much. My mother's future changed as far as I knew. She would not aid in the annihilation of my mate. I hoped. But I needed to know if some parts of my dream were unchanging, if some things were variables and others a constant. For example, a witch aiding Hawk may be a constant while my mother would be a variable who could be replaced with another witch. My mate's death, I shuddered to even think about it, could be a constant in the whole thing. Are you sure? I asked. The women shared a look over their heads, but it was my mother that responded. Of course, she said with a smile. Things have already changed, haven't they? I knew she was referring to her joining hands with Hawk. If you are so worried about your mate, work harder on your illusions. Maybe then you can actually do something to protect your mate, Cedric said. Crystal smacked him across the head, but he shrugged. I am sorry, but it is the truth. You suck at it. I noticed long ago that Cedric had a habit of apologizing when he was not actually sorry. Right. My illusions. I nodded in agreement. It took a toll on both my body and mind, and as Cedric said, I sucked at creating illusions. My progress was slow enough to frustrate both Cedric and I. But that aside, dear, are you sure you want to remain here? Crystal asked. Things are bad at the Coven since we are being hounded by older Covens, but I guarantee we can provide better security than this place. She looked around my office with pursed lips. Her mate is here. Surprisingly, it was Victoria that answered on my behalf. Of course, she has to stay here. Besides, who would protect her better than the Alpha King? Victoria, Crystal shook her head. This place does not have a lick of fortification. We both know how dangerous that can be. I will fortify it. My mother raised her chin. You alone? Crystal massaged her temple. Her ill health made her look smaller and more wrinkled, so when she massaged her temples with her head bent, she looked like a frustrated grandmother sick of the younglings around her. I am still a spirit mage. My mother raised her chin even higher. My magic may not be what it used to be, but I am not powerless. Crystal shook her head. If you want to cast fortification magic, I can help, Aunt Victoria, Cedric piped in. I haven't had a chance to try it out recently. Even with the both of you, Crystal exclaimed. Have you seen the sheer size of the palace? You two alone think your magic is enough to protect the entire place? I was lost in the conversation. I had a little idea what fortification magic entailed since I read about magic a bit, but I didn't know it could be cast over a place and not a person. Then join us, Cedric said with a shrug. It would be stronger if you combined your magic with ours. At this age? Such a large-scale fortification, Crystal shook her head. Then I can ask my sisters, Mother said. Yes, they will. Crystal paused before exploding. What are we even discussing? This is a wolf's den. She cried in exasperation, her voice thinning out. To involve the Coven with the affairs of a wolf. What would the other Covens? It's okay if you do not want to help, but this is for my daughter's safety, so I must do what must be done. What? How can you say I don't want to help? Crystal exclaimed in indignation. You make it seem as if I don't care about her safety. In the first place, who was the one who invited her to the coven and introduced her to her aunts? What has that got to do with keeping her safe? Victoria asked. I even made a room for her in the coven. I asked her to join us, whereas you abandoned her. You abandoned us all. Like that, the two women started to fight. I sipped on my peppermint tea, which helped with my increasing bouts of nausea these days, while the women argued. Hey, how is Eliza doing these days? Cedric asked in a quiet tone as the women attacked each other with words. Did she notice my absence? You are just the weird guy that visits now and then. Why do you think she would notice your absence? I snorted at Cedric, who still hadn't given up his crush on Eliza, who never paid attention to his existence. Shall I introduce myself to her? I shrugged, tuning him out. If I cast fortification magic on the palace, she would notice me, right? His bizarre words pulled my attention back to him. Don't tell me, she would benefit from it as she lives here, so she should notice, right? You are not Eliza's type. I crushed the light in his eyes. What's her type? He asked. I am confident I can change to suit her type. I paused. In the first place, I knew nothing of Eliza's romantic life. The only thing she was concerned with was work, her family, and then work. She likes nice guys, I finally concluded. After all, Eliza herself was nice, so she must be attracted to nice guys and not manipulative people like Cedric. It's a good thing I am nice then. A person who casts fortification for someone other than themselves or their coven is infinitely selfless and thus a nice person. He shrugged. I admired his confidence. I really did. The way arrogant words spilt from his lips made me marvel. You both should stop, Cedric interrupted the women still arguing. Rather than arguing, it would be best to hurry to the coven and ask for anyone interested in helping. After all, we are selfless people who must help those in need. He stood up and dusted his clothes. Besides, why can we not help wolves? Mother Crystal, forget what the other covens will say. Wolves and witches should live together in harmony. I think hybrid babies are cute, so let us set a precedent for the future. I, for one, think mine would be. Cedric stopped his nonsensical talk as Eliza entered the office. Your Majesty. Eliza entered and paused when she noticed the weird atmosphere. I am sorry, but the Alpha King has sent for you. We were on our way. Crystal stood. Yes. Tomorrow, I will start the fortification. Anyone who cares about you will be there, Victoria said. What do you mean by that? Is it that easy? Crystal followed and they continued to argue. I looked at Cedric, whose eyes were stuck to the ceiling with his ears red. I would have laughed if I wasn't nervous about Killian's sudden summon. I gave Cedric a quick smile as I exited the office with Eliza. His gaze cut to me for a second before he glared and looked away. Walking into Killian's office, I met my mate lounging. It was a different atmosphere from his usual busy one, so I was surprised. You are free? I asked as I closed the door behind me. He smiled, the smile making me shiver. It was different from his usual smile. I am taking a break from breaking my back for ungrateful people, he said, and I frowned. What? I asked in confusion and he shrugged. I am taking a break to visit the dungeons. Do you want to come with me? He got out of his seat and offered me a hand. I took his hand without hesitation, but I could not shake off the feeling that things were different with him. He seemed off. Crueler even.
The first stop at the dungeons was Scarlet's cell. There was no way I would have known it was Scarlet's cell if Killian didn't say so, with a chilling grin on his face. She was in wolf form, and her wolf looked nothing like an alpha wolf. Scars and fleas covered the wolf's body. Thin and emaciated, she looked more like a starved omega wolf than a proud alpha. The wolf raised her head and I flinched when I met the soulless black eyes. In them lay deep-seated hatred, not much unlike the look Scarlet used to give me. The wolf growled, yanking at the chains holding it as it tried to charge. She struggled against the chains holding her legs, but the more she struggled, the more the silver chains cut into her skin, making her bleed and poisoning her system. Are you sure she has gone completely rogue? I asked Killian, who laughed, the sound small and happy. It was a ridiculous question. I knew before I even asked because she had the eyes of a rogue, but the way she looked at me, it felt as if she recognized me, which was something rogues could not and should not be able to do. When the wolf raised its head to look at me just then, I felt a rush of fear in my heart at the hatred I saw reflected in her eyes. I felt she recognized me, but there was no way. Today she is not the main character. Come, there is someone I want you to meet. My mate took my hand and led me to the other side of the dungeons where we met an unexpected person. You will regret this. It was Luna Grace with scars on her face and the other exposed parts of her body. Dark Moon won't let this go. I hope they do not, Killian said with a grin that turned into a laugh as she spat at him. I flinched when her bloody saliva landed on his chest. Are you crazy? I exclaimed as Killian casually took out a handkerchief to wipe his shirt. Shouldn't beheading be a suitable punishment for the crime of spitting on the Alpha King? Killian asked, his head tilted to the side. What little color that remained on Grace drained in a split second, but she raised her chin as she gritted her teeth. Hawk will not stand for this, she spat with her eyes flaming. He killed his mate and abandoned his daughter to rot, so what makes you think you are special? Killian asked, and she grinned. Wouldn't you like to know? She laughed as if we were the ones locked up in a dirty dungeon while she stood looking from the outside. If you must know, it is because we are the same. It must be fate that we found each other. Her eyes burned with a chilling madness that had me clutching the hem of my mate's shirt. What do mates and children matter when there is something bigger awaiting us in the future? She shrugged, flipping her hair. I see, Killian said with humor in his voice. I did not expect Hawk to be moved by someone as detestable as him, but I may have overestimated him, he snorted. Let's see if a cohort like you is worth risking his plans for. Grace pursed her lips and Killian smirked, taking my hand in his. Well, you are a bit of a disappointment, but it is my fault for expecting something great from you. Those were his parting words to her. She screamed curses at us as we left, and I watched my mate in confusion. He seemed too excited for someone getting insulted. What did she do? Why is she in the dungeons? I asked when we entered the carriage. She spat on me, he answered easily. Did she spit on him before now? Did she spit on him twice? Luna Grace had always been a wickedly ugly woman who hid her ugliness with even uglier smiles as she pretended to be a good person. I knew long ago that she was unfaithful to her mate, and even when I found out, I was not surprised for long, since she was a person who was only concerned about her gain. Climbing up the social ladder was her priority, so it didn't matter who she stepped on, whether it was her mate or someone else. She fit right in with Hawk. She only treasured Noah, her despicable son, because he had potential, but I wasn't sure she cared about him as a person. Noah, Grace, and Hawk, there was barely any difference between them, aside from Hawk's power, which allowed him leeway to do as he pleased. Seething in the carriage, my eyes fell on a bunch of newspapers. My heart stuttered as I grabbed the first one. In the last few days, I avoided newspapers like the plague, since they always found one way or another to slander me, so I missed this one. I flipped the papers to the page that caught my interest, my hands shivering. It was an exclusive interview with a proclaimed witch. The section condemned hybridity and called me barren. Apparently, hybrids could only reproduce with their kind. Swallowing, I placed a hand on my flat stomach, feeling tears well up in my eyes. Forget it. Killian plucked the paper from my hands. I told you I will handle everything, so you should not worry, he said. What if, I started, unable to look at him, what if it's true? I asked. It's not, he refuted with such finality, one would think he could make it false. But what if I don't, what if there is something wrong with me? I asked, and silence filled the carriage. The silence stretched for a full minute, suffocating me until I had no choice but to look up at him. His gaze was already fixed on me when I turned to look at him, so I stuttered out some words, feeling awkward. I mean, there's a possibility since I am a hybrid and you are not, so there may be incompatibility, you know. I stuttered out, and he shook his head. There is no incompatibility, although it is possible that it may not be as easy for us to conceive as others. It is not incompatibility or barrenness, so stop thinking irrelevant thoughts, he growled, and I had no choice but to nod my head in surprise. The rest of the ride back to the carriage was relatively peaceful, but when we got back, we met chaos in the name of Hawk. Where is she? He demanded. You mean the Luna of Red Lake? Killian asked with a smile. She is where she belongs. You? Hawk looked on the verge of breathing fire. Do not provoke me, Killian, he growled. Oh, are we now on a first-name basis? Killian asked. Shall I also call you by your first name? I snorted as Killian mocked him, and Hawk's eyes dashed to mine as if he just noticed my presence. His dark eyes got darker, and he took a step forward. Do you understand that I am your father? He directed his wrath at me. Do you understand you are standing against your father? Between my father and mate, whose side do you expect me to be on? Even if Killian and I were merely fake mates, I would need to kill my conscience to stand beside a man like Hawk. You will regret this, Hawk said, wagging a finger at me. Funny enough, that's the same thing your mistress said, I snorted. It happened in the blink of an eye. 1 minute I was having a glare-off with Hawk, and in the next, my cheeks stung as his palm connected with my face, and before I even registered the ringing, I heard the sound of clothes ripping as my mate shifted and lunged at Hawk. So right there, in front of the palace, Killian and Hawk went at each other, aiming for the other's throat. My heart pounded in my throat as my stomach squeezed in fear. Kalea pressed me from the inside, wanting to shift, but I held her back, having enough sense not to throw myself into a fight between alphas. It took about 5 warriors to break up the fight, and when my mate shifted back, his eyes glowed an ominous red. The scratches on his skin were healing, but my stomach turned just seeing them. Are you okay? I asked as I approached him, feeling my stomach tremble. I wasn't sure if it was because it was my mate's blood, but I reacted to the sight of blood in a way different from usual. My head ached, my heart ached, and my stomach turned. I felt faint just from seeing blood, and at the same time I felt I would throw up. I am fine, Killian answered, and I nodded, unable to fight down the nausea this time as I retched. The next day, my mother arrived with 5 other women, and together we went to see Killian. They would be casting protective magic around the palace to keep out the hybrid hunters. The air felt different after the many hours spent chanting and casting spells around the castle. The witches were as discreet as possible, but as expected, by the following day, there were people gossiping about me bringing black voodoo to the Alpha King's abode. The talk of Killian and his ancestors never being blessed to rule had spread, and that, too, was somehow linked to me, an evil witch. These days, my life had become nothing short of pandemonium. Look at her prance about as if she is not throwing the kingdom into ruin. I paused my afternoon walk when I heard a sneer coming from someone in my own home. What did you say? I asked the maid walking past me with her nose in the air. Boo. What? Me. She feigned ignorance, pointing a finger at herself as she rearranged her expression to one of surprise. Who else would I be referring to? What did you say to me? I asked, and her eyes widened as she took a step back. Your Majesty, I said nothing. She masked her expression quite well. I would give her that. Did you not just mutter about me throwing the kingdom into ruin? What? How would I dare? The girl exclaimed. By now, a few people had stopped to watch the scene. My name had become a hot topic in the mouth of everyone, so it was no surprise people came out to watch me like a clown. This was the extent of the damage to my name. I was no longer a respected person. More people passed by me these days without greeting, and although I told myself I liked the freedom of not having people bow to me at every turn, it was just an excuse I gave myself to hold my emotions in check. A maid who I hired with my own hands could openly cuss me as I was now being looked down on as a devil. I felt cold inside. People that deferred to me a week ago now treated me casually. I told myself not to be proud, not to let the seat of the Luna Queen get to my head, but I felt I had returned to the days of Red Lake where people glared at me with contempt and called me all sorts of names. Are you calling me a liar? I asked the girl, feeling a headache coming on. No, Your Majesty, but... I sent her out of the palace, and as expected, the story became exaggerated. Once again, I became an evil woman, a witch who fired innocent girls who were doing their best to survive. I swear, I didn't know, I cried in my mate's arms that night. If I had known she was an orphaned girl working hard to support her sick grandmother, I would have given her a second chance. I would not have fired her like that. As if talks about me weren't bad enough, I had to make people talk more smack about me by sending the unnamed maid out of the palace. Why am I the bad guy? She insulted me and I did what was right. I never thought. I felt exhausted all of a sudden. Tears flowed down my cheeks, and no matter how much I tried to hold myself to remind myself not to burden my already burdened mate, I could not stop the tears falling free down my cheeks or the choked words flowing from my lips. Killian coaxed me to sleep that night, and I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes. Still, I had to oversee the palace, so I set out to work again. Victoria and Crystal dropped by to see me that afternoon, and the way they looked at me made me feel terrible. "Are you all right?" Crystal asked. "You look horrible," she added, and I shrugged. Eliza's gaze bore into me, and Jack shook her head, muttering to herself, "She hasn't eaten anything all day, and she spent last night crying. That's why she looks a mess," Jack answered on my behalf. I glared at her, but she gave me a look as if to ask, "What? Did I lie?" Although I felt miserable the previous day, I woke up feeling refreshed after having a good cry the previous night. I hadn't eaten anything all day because I could not find anything that suited my taste. I'd become alarmingly thirsty, but every time someone came to me with a meal, my stomach revolted, so I did not eat. "You should take a break from all this and rest," Victoria said. "Did she not just return from a secret vacation? Ouch! Why did you step on me?" Jack exclaimed, glaring at her sister. "Your Majesty, you should take a break. You don't look very good." "But I am not doing anything, though?" Eliza took up most of my tasks when I came in with my eyes twice their usual size. The maid who got fired had it coming, I knew this, and even though Killian said her sob story, which she sold to the papers, was fake, I still felt like a bad person that ruined someone's life because of my pride. While I felt this way, the sane part of my mind told me I was thinking nonsense, but for some absurd reason. I felt bad, but not as bad as I did the previous night. Unfortunately, there was no way to convince the ladies of this. "Exactly, you are not doing anything, so go take a rest," Victoria urged me. It was 4 against 1, so I had no choice but to leave the office, but when I went back to the bedroom to sleep, I found tears rolling down my face. Aghast, I wiped my cheeks, wondering what in the goddess' name was happening to me. I didn't understand my sudden mood change. A voice from nowhere seemed to be reminding me of everything going wrong in my life. The oracle was missing because of me. Killian was in a bad position because of me. Was it possible that I was ill luck? More bizarre thoughts entered my head, and I cried like a proper fool. Since staying alone did not help my situation, I went to find my mate, but he was in a meeting. Huffing with a sudden burst of anger, I wandered around the palace grounds, careful of avoiding the area around my office. It was while I was wandering about that I ran into Cedric. Rather than his usual dark robes, he seemed dressed up today. He wore dark trousers, a dark green button-up shirt, and his hair was slicked back. Did we have an event at the palace today? "Why are you dressed up?" He flinched when I spoke to him as if he had not noticed me approaching him. "You? Oh, it's you," he said as he gave me a dissatisfied glare. Is Eliza in?" he asked, his eyes darting to the palace. "She works here, so of course, she is in. Did you dress up for her?" I appraised his outfit again. He really put in effort with his appearance for the first time. "Well, I am going in." I blocked his path as he made to step past me. His figure began to fade, so I grabbed his hand and shouted, "I can help you." His figure solidified and he glared at me. "I am a bit bored, so if you join me to train today, I can help you with your unrequited love." "What unrequited love?" he shouted as he went red in the neck. "I don't have an unrequited love, so leave me be." "I am Eliza's friend. Should you be yelling at me?" He opened his mouth on a retort, but ended up pursing his lips. "What can you help me with?" he asked in a tone filled with irritation. I beamed at him and he flinched. "You are acting weird today," he said, but I ignored his words. I was also feeling different. "Let's practice illusions today." Cedric, my appointed teacher, wrinkled his lips, but he agreed, even though he said in the past that he gave up on teaching me. As all forms of magic were the same at a basic level, Cedric tried to help me learn the basics of magic, so I could then learn illusions, but I barely grasped the basics and could not understand a thing about illusions, but things were working out quite well that day. "Have you been practicing?" he asked as I made it rain. No, even if you have been practicing, how can you become this good when you were hopeless just a week ago? It was just what I needed to hear to elevate my mood. I think the goddess is finally showing me some favor. I shrugged. Even I was surprised at how easily I created the phantom rain. I've been thinking, how do I create a labyrinth? Killian. It was difficult for a proud man to back down, but I was not one to relent. I learnt from dealing with rogues that force is necessary, more than necessary. It was often a must. Who knew I would learn something useful for dealing with sane wolves from rogues? Crush his fingers, I instructed the warrior holding down Elias. Do you think the night howlers will stand for this? He let out a screeching howl as the warrior turned his bones to powder. You cannot treat me like... He let out yet another annoying howl as his other hand received its own treatment. If you even care about the night howlers, then you would cooperate with me. Of course, he did not cooperate, so I had to force his cooperation. Why did you do it? Asides from working with Hawk, Fraser, and the rest, Elias was also involved in the recent outbreak of rogues. Who would believe that one of the descendants of the 7 founding alphas would embezzle money to fund something as evil as this? I said I am innocent. You bast! Ah! I nodded at the warrior, who took his cues quite seriously and executed his actions perfectly. Since Elias was too arrogant to speak, I went looking for Fraser. I met yellow skin hanging on bones. His eyes looked blank as I approached his cell. At a point, I even considered letting this man rot in here, rather than him receiving the death penalty, because of how well his wife begged and how useful she had become in the investigations against her mate. I never expected to find something as sinister as a drug that could make wolves turn rogue in a short time when I decided to investigate the issue of embezzlement in the kingdom. Good afternoon, I greeted the lifeless man in front of me. If he could not greet me, who was I not to greet him? An uncertain emotion flickered in his eyes before they returned back to their default lifelessness. Your mate has begged me to release you, and since she has been instrumental in uncovering your evil, I even considered it, hence the delay in your sentencing, but you have refused to cooperate. He flinched when I mentioned his mate, but remained unmoved. Are you willing to talk, or shall I bring your pups to beg you? You will rot in. His dead eyes finally came to life with a blazing fire. Despite his thin voice, I heard the clear venom in his tone. Yes, I will die a cruel death and whatnot, but how about you? He gritted his teeth. Or shall I introduce your family to the drug? He flinched, his teeth tearing apart his dry lips. I have given you so many chances, and at this point I might give up. In the first place, it was not my duty to question prisoners, but the existence of a drug that could turn people rogue was not something to be handled lightly. This is your last chance. Although you are too far gone to escape death, this is your chance to free your family. I sighed as I got back to the Emerald Annex. Orion led in 2 women as I took off my jacket. There is no need to waste my time, I said. Your mates are facing certain death. Esther Fraser fell on her face as usual, begging for her little children who did not deserve to grow up without a father, while Elias' mate held her head high as if she was the most important figure in the kingdom. The Eliases had a proud history in this kingdom, a family that produced a number of Luna Queens, including the previous one. Before Bale and Dark Moon grew to where they were, the Eliases were at the very top. They had a reason to be proud. I felt a sense of dark pleasure knowing I was about to shatter their pride. Night howlers will not stay still. You are humiliating our alpha, my mate, for petty reasons, your majesty. She emphasized my as if she was the alpha king. Was the position of the alpha king so little, so funny, so insignificant, that an ordinary Luna could speak to me like this? Did you forget your mate is guilty of embezzlement? Orion answered with a frown. And have you forgotten just who you are speaking to? Nonsense, the woman exclaimed. Just who do you think we are? Embezzlement? What do we lack for us, too? You are giving me a headache. I massaged my temple to prove my point. If you want to share a cell with your mate, I can make it work, but don't come here to bother me. She looked on the verge of arguing, but whatever she saw on my face made her shut her mouth. These women would never know the full extent of their mate's crimes, and there was nothing wrong with that. I had them thrown into the dungeons for embezzling public funds, but more than embezzlement, they also came together to create a drug that made wolves turn rogue. Fraser was reluctant to confess, but a man with a family could not remain tight-lipped when his family was threatened. Reluctant to invest their resources in an experiment that may fail, they took the kingdom's resources and used it as they pleased. My skin crawled and my claws sharpened as I imagined how they must have laughed together, preparing something so sinister. "It was because of you," Fraser's words resounded in my head. If you were not so stubborn, we would not have gone through such extreme means to keep you in check." To destabilize my government, they really went that far as hurting innocent subjects, as far as creating rogues to throw people into a panic. I had a headache. Orion dragged out the women whose mates were the leading culprits in this case. Of course, there was Alpha Hawk involved in this, but he covered his tracks better than the others, so there was not a single proof that he was either involved in embezzling public funds or using said funds to fund evil research. "Scarlet?" I muttered the name like a curse. "Do you miss her?" I raised my head to my mate, and the darkness closing in on me cleared up. She smiled, and it would not be an exaggeration to say her smile lit up my world. "What are you doing here?" She only ever visited in the mornings. "Are you complaining?" "Never in a million years." She closed the door and came over to settle on my thighs, then she threw her hands around my neck. I was surprised at her forward behavior, but not displeased. "Did something good happen?" I asked when she nestled her head in the crook of my neck. "No, but I feel like something good is about to happen." She seemed in a good mood, and considering all the things going wrong, I was surprised anyone around me could be in a good mood. "Did you have a dream?" I asked, but felt her shake her head against my shoulder. "No, surprisingly, I do not have any dreams these days." She didn't sound worried about that. "Is that all right?" I asked, and she nodded against my neck again. It was just a few weeks ago when she whined about not being able to dream of the future again, no matter how much she tried. "Yeah, I don't always have to dream, you know. I have you, so I am sure things will work out." My heart squeezed and an insurmountable pressure weighed down on me. Yes, she had me. I should be able to sort things out without worrying her. "Yes, I got you," I vowed, feeling my heart race. What if I disappointed her? What if things became a bigger mess? What if I disappointed her? I had never doubted my abilities as much as I did then. Despite things not going my way for a long time now, I remained unshaken, tired, but optimistic. But when my mate said those words, I felt my muscles tighten. They were not unexpected words. It was something I already knew, but suddenly I felt pressed for time. The goddess being on my side, my mate was still on my thighs when we received news that the oracle had been found. "I knew you had things covered." She pressed a drowsy kiss to my cheek, and Orion coughed awkwardly before leaving the office. Things were falling in place, but there was still Hawk, who remained slippery. I had his supposed lover and daughter in the dungeons, but he still proved elusive. Shall I just have him confined for treason? I may not be able to prove that he killed my brother or all his other offenses, but he attacked me. That was enough to convict him of treason, but Dark Moon would not let him go, and I had barely started weakening their influence across the kingdom. While I systematically drove Dark Moon to a corner, they announced their breakup from the kingdom, and as if that was not bad enough, there was suddenly an influx of rogues in the capital. So many that extermination of rogues became inevitable. I was in a good mood these days. Although I no longer had any dreams, whether of the past, present, or future, my magic improved. My wolf was lounging and lazing around, and Serena had been found. The oracle could not return to the capital yet, but we knew where she was, and Killian sent warriors to protect her. Things were going well, but I should have known better than to relax. It was hit after a few days of calmness. First, the temple came out to say that Killian and his lineage were never blessed, and while the news rattled us all, Dark Moon Pack officially announced they would be leaving the kingdom. And as if that was not bad enough, the grounds of the capital shook as rogues began to attack from every corner. Where is the Alpha King? As there is no Alpha Prince to send into battle this time, shouldn't the Alpha King come out? Can we even call him the king? Have we not been held hostage by those people for too long? Without Dark Moon, what will we do as a kingdom? Those were the concerns of the kingdom. It was like a bucket of ice-cold water had been splashed on me, reminding me that I had no reason to be happy. Although my mood fluctuated for no reason recently, I still felt good, but there was no reason to feel good. Things were falling apart. It was while I paced in the bedroom, waiting for Killian's meeting to end so I could speak to him, that I received a letter. The messy scrawl made me cringe even before I read the letter. Are you ready to surrender, or shall I add a bit more pressure? Things could go differently depending on what you choose. The letter was not signed. Of course it was not, but I knew without a doubt who sent it. Hawk, are you messing with me? I mumbled to myself, balling up the letter and throwing it across the room. My skin itched and my wolf pushed me to shift. I felt uncomfortable in my skin, so I almost let my wolf take over me for a second, but Killian walked in then. What happened? What did they say? I asked, rushing at him. He gave me a tight smile that made my heart ache. The council, what is left of it, have suggested we tackle the issue of the rogues first. I flinched at the meaning behind his words. But we have sent warriors already. Even Jacqueline left my side to join the battle against rogues. Orion would be leaving soon. Skilled warriors who had fought rogues in the past were already dealing with the issue, so why did Killian have to join them? It will be faster if I handle it myself, he said with a shrug, and I gritted my teeth. Like a fool, I felt tears well up in my eyes. So when are you leaving? I asked, avoiding him as he tried to hug me. Fortunately, well, in reality it is unfortunate, but the rogues are in the capital, so I do not have to travel far to deal with them. He grabbed me when I tried avoiding his touch again. I am sorry, but it is something I have to do. But you are the king. In the first place, the Alpha King commanded his warriors. He did not join them in battle. I know that. Can't you not go? I asked with wide, hopeful eyes, but he shook his head. In another situation, I would not need to, but Dark Moon has pulled their warriors from all around the kingdom. I have to deal with the rogues as quickly as possible before they cause irreparable damage, he explained. But you are just one man. What difference will your presence make? I complained, but even as I said that, I knew there was no point in arguing. Even when his father sent him to battle with rogues as a teenager without experience, he came back leading the warriors. Be careful, I muttered, feeling resignation weigh me down. Yes, I will be. The palace will be protected so you do not have to worry while I am away. How could I worry about my safety when I was not the one going into battle? He did not have time to dilly-dally, so after changing his outfit, he arranged for the warriors to go with him, and they set off that night. Since Killian was leaving, Orion could not leave too. The beta grumbled beside me as we came out to see him off. If anything happens to her, you are dead meat. Killian wagged a finger at Orion, who pressed his lips together in displeasure. What could happen to her here? This is the safest place in the kingdom, he murmured. If you are so worried about your mate, allow me to go so you can stay with her. Killian growled at Orion, who bent his head. It was the first time I realized these men, the ones who were involved in the past battle with the rogues, really loved the battlefield, enough to complain about not being allowed to go back. I studied my mate to see if he too was like that. Was he itching to vanquish rogues, in Jack's words? His face gave nothing away as he turned to me. I will make sure it does not take long, he promised, and I nodded, fighting the tears burning my eyes. I love you. Words that made me feel warm and fuzzy made me feel desolate then, lonely even. You have to return, I said, and he nodded. How could I not return? My place is by your side, he assured me, but I did not feel assured. My hands trembled as he pulled me into a final hug and placed a chaste kiss on my lips. A heavy weight pressed down on my chest as the men turned their backs to leave. I reached out a hand to grab my mate, to pull him back to my side, but I held myself back. My stomach twisted up in knots, and the tears I forced back all the while cascaded down my cheeks. He'll be fine, Orion tried to assure me. This is a tiny compared to what he has faced in the past. I nodded, trying to pull myself together. You are the Luna Queen, I mumbled to myself. Pull yourself together? It was easier said than done. Why did it feel like my whole world was at stake? Why did breathing become so hard? Why did I feel as if my world had tilted on its axis? "Don't be dramatic," Kalea said, although I felt her unease. "He is the Alpha King. He will be back safely." Everyone said that, but I did not feel good. He said he would not be gone for more than a week, but a lot could happen in a week. None of us knew what Hawk was planning, but we all knew it was something disastrous. It was no coincidence that his pack suddenly announced autonomy and withdrew their warriors as soon as rogues swarmed the capital. That night I had a dream. No, I had a series of dreams, each of them more bizarre than the other. In all of them, I was crying over a faceless body that closely resembled my mate. I woke up an infinite number of times in the night, gasping for breath as grief choked me. Salty tears dripped into my mouth no matter how hard I tried to pull myself together. When the darkness of the night started to turn gray, I sat up in bed with painfully swollen eyes. I could not sleep, so I decided to go on a run. I passed the maids starting their work and the warriors changing their shifts as I walked into the forest, shivering from the morning cold. After shifting, I felt a bit better, and after running around the forest until the gray dawn turned bright with daylight, I felt calm, suddenly nauseous but clear-headed. As usual, I practiced my magic for 2 hours before I started my day officially. I resisted the urge to enter my mate's office as I entered the Emerald Annex to meet with Orion. "Your Majesty, you could have sent for me." Orion stood when I entered his office. "I have nothing important to do, so I came myself." He was still wearing the clothes from the previous day. He patted down his shirt when he noticed my gaze. "Any news?" "No, we have not heard anything, but they must have arrived by now." I nodded my heavy head. "Is there anything you want, ma'am?" I shook my head. "No, I will just go have breakfast." Alone for the first time in months. There was no word from Killian and the men he set out with, but there was word from Red Lake concerning the release of their Luna. And there was word from Dark Moon about their heir. At first, I interpreted Hawk's letter the wrong way. I assumed he wanted to shackle me to his side, but I was wrong. It turned out that Grace was pregnant with his child. How was that even possible? I stared at the letter from Dark Moon, and then I stared at the letter from Red Lake. Then I burst into laughter. What sort of sick joke? How could Grace be so shameless, and her mate too? Did he know that his mate was carrying another man's child? I left the letter on my desk as I made for the dungeons. I had to confirm this ridiculous news with my own eyes. If Grace was indeed pregnant, we could not keep her in the dungeons. Orion came out to see me off, with a troubled look in his eyes. "Killian asked me to keep you safe," he muttered with a frown. "Can't you wait for 3 more hours? I would be able to escort you then." He gave me a hopeful look, but I shook my head. "You have a lot of work to do," I reminded him. My mission was to quickly check up on Grace, and between Orion and me, I was the one with the less work, so it felt unfair to make him escort me to the dungeons when he already had a mountain of work waiting for him. I am just going to meet with Grace. I had to see the shameless woman with my own eyes. There's no need to worry since I am going with such a large number of warriors. I was not unaware of the dangers that came with going out at this time. I went with as many as 6 warriors. The ordinary wolves were agitating for Killian and me to step down. There were rogues roaming around, and it was not clear what Hawk was planning, so I knew to tread with caution, hence the large number of escorts. "Please be careful," Orion said to me with a sigh. It was clear that he would stop me if he could, but of the 2 of us, I was the one with the higher rank, so he could not command me. "Don't worry, I will." I waved at him as we set out. The last time I took a step out of the palace, it was to go to the dungeons with Killian to see this same woman. As the horses pulled the carriage, I wondered if there was a possibility of Grace really being pregnant with Hawk's child. If she was, we could not keep her in the dungeons. We could not lock up an innocent child, even if they hadn't been born yet. Oh, I am annoyed. I massaged my temples. "Do you care for a sip of water?" One of the 2 warriors in the carriage with me asked as he poured from a pitcher. I was thirsty, so I graciously accepted the cup from him and took a sip. After the first sip, I felt thirstier, so I drained the cup. I handed him the cup as our carriage lurched violently. It turned out to be a broken wheel, so we had to change carriages. It did not occur to me to be on alert until I thought of how convenient it was for us to find another carriage after ours lost its wheel. When I frowned, about to speak, I found my speech slurring. "Did you drug me?" I asked the unfamiliar warrior, whose profile started to blink in and out of focus as my consciousness faded. "Do you feel drugged?" he asked. Rather than panic, I felt a foreign serenity overtake me. Even as my eyes closed and my brain registered the fact that we were not headed towards the dungeons, the only thing I felt was sleepy, and before I knew it, my eyes closed in sleep. I did not know how long I slept, but while I slept, I had a dream. It was a dream of the throne room. Right on the throne that belonged to my mate was a wolf, a pristine white wolf. As I watched the wolf, I saw my mate's dark one grab the white wolf by its neck and set it on the ground. The white wolf whined and jumped back up on the throne. Cheeky. That word had me opening my eyes. When my eyes opened, I saw a familiar ceiling. It took my brain a couple of seconds to recognize the ceiling I was staring up at. "You are awake." I turned my head at that familiar voice, and then I smiled. "It's been a while," I murmured. "You became even more cheeky." The woman sneered at me, but unlike her usual behavior, she did not rush to hit me. "And you are still as ugly and ill-tempered as before, Sylvia," I greeted the head of my former sub-pack. "Oh, am I tied up?" I asked when I tried to use my hands to support myself, but found them unable to move. "You thought you had become better than us? Huh? Because you managed to climb into the king's bed like the little slut that you are," she laughed rather than answer my question. "Unfortunately, Carrot, trash will remain trash. If you had been a good little slut, you could have lived a quiet life with Alpha Norman until he got tired of you, but you chose this path, so you have no one else but yourself to blame. You better stay still," Sylvia warned, wagging a finger at me. She exploded as if she waited a long time to say that to me. "Why should I?" I smirked at her as I tightened my fists and yanked my hands apart. The thick rope did not give way on the first try, neither did they tear apart on the second, but on the third, they ripped like a flimsy dress, and I smirked to myself. Not only was I a white wolf, but I was also mated to a warrior, and the Alpha King no less. Surprised? I asked the woman who used to bully me in the past. "You better stay still," she warned, but surprisingly, she did not approach me. "Don't worry, I want to see this shit show till the end." I scoffed derisively. Alpha Howard had always been a useless, slow-witted man. It was no secret that his mate ran the pack, but I never expected him to be this dense. What did he think he would achieve from kidnapping me? No, wait, how did a small pack like Red Lake manage to bring me from the capital to their village? "I forgot all about you people, but it seems you all have been thinking about me." I looked around the room that used to be mine. They did not even bother giving it out or even clearing it out. "Did you keep this room as proof that the Luna Queen used to be your pack maid?" I think Sylvia finally had enough of my mouthiness as she charged at me. Unfortunately for her, but fortunately for me, I was no longer the wolfless Omega she and her pack used to take advantage of. "You little shit!" she exclaimed, coming at me again. This time the Alpha entered the room and she stopped dead in her tracks. "I told you not to do anything reckless." He exploded at Sylvia. I looked at the girl beside him and laughed. She attached herself so firmly to him, one would think they were family or lovers. "You." Howard turned his burning gaze my way. "Me." I mimicked his tone. "You have dipped your hands in hot water." More like submerged himself and his pack in a burning fire. "You think you are now high and mighty because you mated with that bastard." Kalea growled before he could complete his words. What was it with people and insulting my mate? Careful. Blasphemy against the royal family is punishable by death. Whether or not they spoke badly about Killian, there was little chance for Red Lake Pack to survive after the stunt they pulled. "Do you think your bastard of a mate will come to save you? Is that why you are unnecessarily confident?" He sneered. "Wouldn't he first need to save himself before he comes to save you?" "Oh, wait, he can't even save himself." For the first time since I opened my eyes in this hellhole, I felt discomfort prick my skin. "Judging by the look on your face, you don't even know the predicament of your mate." He snorted and I swallowed. "Do you even know if he is alive?" He mocked. My heart fell to my stomach, but I shook my head. Unlike you, who would not know when your mate is spreading her cheap legs and getting bred by someone else, I can actually feel my mate, I sneered at him. If anything happened to Killian, I would feel it. It was the only thing keeping me sane after his taunts. You bitch. He yanked my hair back before I knew it. You killed my son, he snarled, spittle flying everywhere. Despite being an alpha, Howard was never really threatening until then. You killed my son and cost me my mate. Did you think I would let it go? His grip on my hair tightened. You are the reason I lost my mate. You took her away from me. I grabbed the hand holding my hair and let my claws sink into it. He hissed, but he did not let my hair go. All we ever did was put up with your wretched ass. I kept your mother when she had nowhere to go but you ungrateful. He shook me by my hair, spittle flying in my face as he cussed. Hey, Alpha, this is not the plan. Bella came to stand beside us, grabbing his bicep. He calmed down in the blink of an eye. Let's just keep her until they come. Who are you expecting? I wheezed out after being roughly manhandled, and Howard glared at me, his nostrils flared. Wait and see. This is your last chance to be useful to the pack. Ungrateful wretch, he spat. Ungrateful thing, he hissed, slamming the door shut with me in a docile Sylvia. It looks like they are here? Sylvia said a few moments later, a shaky smile on her lips as we both heard a commotion coming from downstairs. Where is she? It was the voice of a man, or a boy. The voice was soft and calm, yet filled with power. I shivered as cold climbed up my spine. A witch, or a wizard. My heart plummeted to the ground as I broke out in a cold sweat. Were they hybrid hunters working with Red Lake? In a split second, while I tried to figure out a way out of a situation more dangerous than I first imagined, dark smoke filled the room and I saw him. Hello. I stiffened at the cool voice that sounded in the room as my legs shook. So you are the hybrid. I cast the first magic I thought of, and thankfully it did not fail. As I had practiced creating labyrinths for a while now, the minute I tried, the setting changed from my abandoned room in Red Lake Pack to a maze-like structure. The only problem was that I never learnt how to detach myself from the illusions I created. I was lucky to even be able to create such a tricky illusion, but no matter how much Cedric taught me, I never could get myself out of an illusion without destroying the said illusion. This is an illusion, I heard that cold and eerie voice from earlier. Illusion magic. There was no hiding the awe in that creepy voice that sent shivers racing down my spine. That voice was too close, and it made me think, what if, just what if this illusion was on a small scale? In the first place, I could not say I had a talent for creating illusions. It was just that these days, I had an unexplainable burst of luck with handling my ability. If this was a tiny labyrinth, the strange man or boy would find me in no time, and then the entire point of this labyrinth would be defeated. I felt genuine panic then, and to make matters worse, I felt an unexplainable sharp pain on my right shoulder that had me doubling over. Ack! I shoved a fist into my mouth to stop myself from screaming. Oh, are you there? I heard the man's voice as I fought back a loud gasp. You have such potent magic, as expected of Victoria's daughter, the man was saying as I examined my shoulder. I expected to see blood dripping down my arm, or at least an ugly bruise, but when I raised my sleeve to look at my shoulder, I met neither bruise nor blood. Killian. Something must have happened to my mate, and that thought alone hurt more than the phantom pain. Ah, I found the exit of your maze. I heard that dratted, creepy voice again. But what shall I do? I still want to explore it. As the man spoke, I felt another burst of pain, this one worse than the first. This time, I could not stop myself from exclaiming out loud as I lost control of the illusion. You. I raised my head to see Sylvia glaring down at me with eyes that sparkled with anger, hatred, and wrath. They said you were an evil witch, but I did not think you would be so despicable. Although she looked paler than she did a minute ago, she still moved with vigor and agility. Sylvia. She was also like this before I left the pack. A woman who only knew how to use brute force and would never, no matter the situation, shy away from hurting others. No matter the circumstance, she always responded with her fist. Whether she was cornered or insulted, whether she felt disrespected or overlooked, her fists were always her solution, and she was rather good at using her fists. And at that moment, she was approaching with raised fists. Her fist launched at my jaw, and I moved out at the last minute, barely escaping her iron fist. She reached for my neck as if to strangle me while I started to shift, but then a heavy weight fell on me mid-shift, startling me. It was Sylvia. "You seem to be weak at basic magic." The eerie voice came again, and I flinched, ready to cast another illusion. "Can you stay still for a minute?" "Who are you?" Despite trying to make my voice solid, I ended up with a shaky voice. While I inched away from him, I went through the list of illusions I could create, and the one that would be the easiest in escaping this creepy man. "That's something you should have asked from the beginning, but you like to skip the basics. I am Samuel." He took a step forward, and I took two back, gritting my teeth as my heart pounded against my chest, and my breathing turned harsher than a marathon runner's breath after a long race. "If you do not learn the basics, something like illusions would be useless to you." Sylvia groaned, and we both turned to the lump on the ground. Then she let out a loud snore. I put her to sleep. A child would know to do that if they learnt the basics. "What do you want with me?" I asked the weird man named Samuel. "Well, isn't it that I'm curious about you? I want to learn about you. Isn't that obvious?" My heart paused its rattling as my mind blanked in confusion. "What? Who?" My shoulders shook and ached at the same time. Where was my mate, and what was happening to him? I tried visiting your home, but the fortifications were a bit extreme," Samuel said, taking a step forward. "If you think I would be easy to take down, why would I want to take you down?" The man with mismatched eyes that reminded me of crystal cocked his head to the side, his high brows lowering in a frown. "I only wanted to meet you, as I am curious about hybrids." "You kidnapped me." He joined hands with Red Lake to kidnap me. It was no wonder Howard could be so brazen, so forward as to touch me. Red Lake seemed to have gained a powerful supporter. Because of curiosity? No. There was a notice that the hybrid returned to Red Lake, so I came. Why would I kidnap you? Did these bastards parade me like a monkey in a circus? "Were you kidnapped?" Samuel asked. I had to leave this place. Red Lake was not safe, and whatever Howard had planned, it seemed to be more than I first imagined. I could no longer underestimate the man. "You've seen me," I answered the creepy man. "I am leaving." I stepped past him to leave the place, but he caught my hand and I froze from the numbing cold of his hand. "Oops, sorry. Shadow magic is like that." He let me go. "Shadow magic?" "Like Cedric," I muttered to myself, looking at the man again. "Oh, you know that punk." He followed me as I made my way down the stairs of the pack house. "I am sorry if I startled you, but I never meant any harm. Just—" We both paused when we got to the entrance of the pack house. It was because the place was surrounded. "It seems we have run into your worst nightmare," the man beside me muttered, his soft, eerie voice hardening. "We found the hybrid," one of the 10 witches standing with Howard said. Howard looked at me with satisfaction in his eyes. Before anyone had the chance to react, I thought of rogues, and then I manifested them. "What?" Howard exclaimed, but he was the least of my worries. As rogues attacked from nowhere, I shifted and took to my heels. I did not dare turn back to the scene I was trying to escape as I ran with a heavy weight weighing down my heart and a bitter taste spreading on my tongue. There were shouts behind me, and I think I dodged a curse as I fled Red Lake for the second time in my life. Even as I ran at neck-breaking speed, my mind reminded me of how slim the possibility of escaping was at this point. There were around a dozen or so witches out for my neck. Red Lake would not let me go as easily as the first time. I had to hide, but where would I hide? Would the ground open up to hide me? The trees in Red Lake were not enough to stop witches. Every strand of fur on Kalea trembled as we ran. The illusion I created as I fled must have faded as I left the scene. My mouth trembled, so I gritted my teeth, fighting down a whimper. The last time I knew pure, unadulterated terror like this, I could not even remember. I did not know how long I ran, but I knew I tired out faster than usual. Creating 2 illusions back to back had that effect. I zigged past trees and ran farther into Red Lake's woods, my fur matting to my skin as sweat drenched me. Despite how fast and how far I ran, I felt them closing in on me. I dared not look back, but I felt them near. They were here, and at any point, they would surround me. It was the worst time to feel nauseous, yet my stomach rumbled and I became lightheaded. "Kalea," I called at my wolf, but she whined. Even without her speaking, I knew she did not feel good. It would have been better to put them to sleep. I turned when I heard that eerie voice and almost stumbled. As expected, learning the basics is important. Samuel went silent as my wolf whined and then retched. "Ah, I see," he murmured, as I forced myself to hold my shift, preparing to run again. Whatever he saw, I didn't, but I did see a witch, though. A woman with pitch-black hair advanced on me. She looked my mother's age and ran faster than I could on 2 legs. "I did not expect to see you here," the woman snarled at Samuel, who came to stand in front of me like a shield. "Anastasia, long time, still as nasty as ever, I see." Samuel chuckled, the sound as eerie and off-putting as his voice. "Step aside. This does not concern you," the woman said. "You know quite well that everything that concerns Victoria concerns me," the man responded. "We have our laws which must be— Spare me the long talk. Shall we battle, or shall I just kill you?" Before he even finished speaking, his form was already faint. It reminded me too much of Cedric. "Be it as you wish." I jumped back in time as an arrow whooshed past me, grazing my arm. "Sneaky." Samuel laughed, the sound echoing around the forest. Then it rained arrows on the woman. As if anticipating the move, the woman created a bubble-like shield around her, and the arrows bounced. "If you want to get at her, you have to first get through me." Then they went at each other, and I went the other way. I knew neither of them, so even if it felt like Samuel was defending me, it could be for a sinister reason, so I gathered myself and dashed away, ignoring my quivering limbs. Red Lake was a small pack, so their territory was also small. I could only run at a fast pace for so long before earing the borders. My wolf circled back when we neared the pack border. Not only would we encounter warriors, but it also was not safe to enter another pack at this point. I had to hide, but my feet could not stop moving. Stopping, to my anxious mind, felt like waiting to be ambushed, giving up. My feet, as if with a mind of their own, carried me. My body ached and my legs slowed, but I did not stop. Even as I started to trot rather than run, I did not stop moving. "Kalea," I called my wolf, but there was no response. Too tired to shift, I let her instincts dictate our moves. It was when my legs started to cramp that I perceived a delicious scent. "Killian?" I shook my head. There was no way my mate, who was dealing with rogues in the capital, could be here. However, I forced my aching legs to follow the scent. The closer I got to the scent, the fainter it got. All I could perceive was blood. An overwhelming scent of blood made my stomach rumble again. Which blood? I swear she was here. I heard that eerie voice again and paused. The sun was setting in the sky. My limbs were tired while my legs were cramped. I could not afford to run any more than I could afford a confrontation with the witches surrounding the pack house. So rather than continue to follow the scent I associated with my mate, I stopped. If it was a trick by the hybrid hunters— "You better not be lying." That voice. The fatigue in my bones seemed to evaporate as I heard that voice, so I picked up my tired body and rushed towards the sound of the voice. "Kalea?" My wolf barreled into the body, and I jumped back when I heard a groan. Startled, I took a good look at my mate, and my wolf let out a whine. He was in a bad, terrible state. Still in the clothes he left the palace in, blood-soaked different parts of the uniform. There was blood on his face, and I noticed his right side sagged compared to the left. "Let's get you out of here." Despite how tattered he looked, he still gathered my heavy wolf into his arms, and we went back to Red Lake's pack house, which was surrounded by warriors. The fatigue of running for hours with a rapidly racing heart and the sudden calmness were enough to knock me out. Amethyst! It was Victoria I saw when I opened my eyes a few hours later. Her eyes were swollen to twice their normal size, to the point where I blinked 2 or 3 times to make sure I wasn't caught in an illusion. "This is why I told you to hide, to flee," she exclaimed, and after that came a long lecture about safety, as if I knowingly followed the supposed escorts that brought me to Red Lake. I listened to her berate me for a good 10 minutes before my mate came in. "You are awake." He gave me a tired smile. Although he had washed his face and his eyes were as sharp as ever, it was hard to hide his tiredness. "We have to leave soon, but before that, is there anything you want to say to Howard?" For a long time after I left Red Lake Pack, I had been consumed by thoughts of revenge. Even after Noah's death, I still considered the entirety of Red Lake as my enemy. I may have forgotten about Red Lake if they did not come back to haunt me. I never forgave them, but I did forget. Now I had no reason to let them go. I was not a saint who could embrace those who persecuted me all my life and knowingly endangered me. I was not a person who would shed a tear or feel sorry for the fall of my enemy, so I laughed at the misfortune that befell Red Lake. When Killian asked about a final word to Howard, my answer was no. I had nothing to say to him or his pack. The only person who ever treated me like a person and not in a thing was Amanda, and she was long dead, so when the pack house lit up in flames, I did not feel a shred of guilt. Please reconsider all the years spent raising you. Howard and his pack were outside their pack house watching as it burnt to the ground, having been lit on fire by Killian's men. They say a child not embraced by their village would burn down said village to feel its warmth. The fire blazing in front of me felt like a healing balm. I ignored Howard, clinging to my leg with snot and tears running down his chin. You should have known better than to touch my queen, Killian muttered from beside me, clasping my hand in his. But, Your Majesty! He looked ugly with tears pouring down his face. We raised her. A reward. Your reward is the life of your people. I turned to the people gathered with red eyes around the pack house, watching it burn. As my eyes passed over each and every one of them, I laughed to myself, remembering what this person and that person had done. In Red Lake Pack, I was at the bottom of the bottom. There was no one who treated or looked at me with even a bit of warmth. Was I cruel for not feeling a shred of remorse when I looked into the faces of so many crying people? Yes, I was, but I did not care. If I had not created an illusion of rogues and escaped, I may have lost my life. If Samuel wasn't there, if Killian did not arrive in time, the hybrid hunters may have taken me. Red Lake never cared about me, so I chose not to care about them. In the end, Red Lake was disbanded. Their land became free to be fought over by the neighboring packs. Sylvia and Howard were transported to the capital, and the other pack members had to find themselves new packs. You will have to go with Victoria, Killian said when we neared the capital. Her coven has agreed to protect you until all this blows over. What? You haven't even told me what is happening, I accused him, but he only gave me a small smile. Killian, Hawk and his pack have officially occupied the capital, so it is not safe for you. What? I exclaimed. So a rebellion? It was not unexpected, but still I was surprised. What of the rogues? As Cordelia is the temporary head of Night Howlers, she has lent us her warriors to tackle the matter of rogues in the capital. We have also taken charge of Fraser's pack, so his warriors are also involved in dealing with the rogues. The rogues, in the first place, were used as distractions and a way to divide my manpower against Hawk's rebellion. What can I do? I asked as he massaged his temples. You can stay safe, he answered. I am glad you were not in the palace. He stopped. What is happening in the palace? He pursed his lips. Killian. Hawk? He closed his eyes and let out a deep breath. Hawkie has occupied the palace. Protect her, I told my beta, who nodded. I would trust Orion with my life, but I could not trust anyone with my mate, so no matter how much security I set up as I left the palace, I still left with raging unease. Styx muttered under his breath and paced about as we left our mate behind. It was difficult, but it was necessary, and for now it didn't seem like Hawk had any interest in her. Your Majesty, there is a problem. We had barely left the palace when we encountered the first problem. And from then until we reached where the other warriors were camped, we encountered difficulties upon difficulties. There were rogues everywhere, protesters, and at one point we encountered witches. I assumed we encountered so many problems on the way because Hawk did not want me to join the battle, fearing the havoc I would wreak in a short time. That was until I got the letter. I was greeting the warriors as comrades when the letter from Lady Cordelia came. Despite how much sincerity she showed recently, she was still my vile stepmother, who I kicked out of the palace so I could not trust her, but her letter gave me a start. We had steady communication since she told me about the planned assassination, but we never got anything meaningful from her before now. Amethyst in danger. Those were the only words I needed. I just arrived at the camp and I hadn't even had time to write to my mate, but I sent for a horse. The person who needed me the most at this point was not here. "Are you running away?" Jack asked, her cheeks flushed with alcohol as we passed each other. "Isn't it fun? I almost missed hunting rogues." "Good. Since you are here, you'll be temporarily taking charge of this expedition." That sobered her up fast. "Where are you going?" she asked in alarm. "Home, to my mate." There were no horses available on request, so I shifted and raced back to the palace with my heart in my throat and my emotions all messed up. "Please, be safe. Please, be safe." Cordelia's letter detailed Hawk's plan to attack the palace in my absence. By now, Orion must be at alert, but I had to be there before they arrived. Even if I failed to do any other thing, I could not leave my mate under the protection of another man at this time. I didn't even think of Hawk's plan to occupy the palace in my absence. I could care less that I was pushed to the battleground for no reason other than for Hawk to have better access to my home. All I cared about was the most precious being to me. They could have the palace, but my mate was there. After hours of running, I finally got a horse. The journey back to the palace was tense, and when I got there and heard my mate was away, I did not know how to feel. Orion. My beta shivered as I called his name. Did I or did I not ask you to protect her? Hawk hasn't targeted her, and I sent 6 warriors with her. It's just the dungeons. He trailed off as Styx growled. Shall we go get her? Stay here. Hawk is coming. With that, I left the palace in search of my mate. Just the dungeons, he said. It was about an hour's ride by carriage to the dungeons, but I met a sight that made me bite my lips till they bled. What happened? A carriage with my emblem was discarded at the side of the road, and the warriors inside were fast asleep. A group of travelers had stopped on the way to examine them, and when they saw me, they shrank away. Molten lava flowed in my veins as Ian, one of the escorts, groaned in his sleep. Thinking he was about to wake up, I glared at him, but the bastard adjusted his position and went back to sleep. The fire in my veins burned hotter, and I grabbed him. Your Majesty! Like a trigger had been pulled, his eyes snapped open. His exclamation startled the other men beside him awake. His gaze went from groggy to clear in the blink of an eye, while my muscles tensed and I gritted my teeth, my jaw aching. Styx was pushing forward. It took all my self-control to hold him back, and the more I restrained him, the more feral he got. My mate, my wolf growled. Where is my mate? Amethyst, my voice came out thick. Where is my mate? Ian blinked. The men around blinked, and one by one, the last traces of sleep vanishing from their eyes. The horse. Where did the horse? Hey, why? After that came chaos, which I didn't have time to deal with. I was about to lose my cool when news from Orion reached me. Red Lake. Red Lake took her. Although I knew this was a part of Hawk's plan to get me far from the palace. I knew what to expect upon my return, but I could not stop myself. Safeguarding the throne paled in comparison with finding my mate. Here you are! Victoria found me. Where is my daughter? Her eyes blazed with green flames as she glared at me. Where is my daughter? Come with me. She was reluctant, fussy, so I moved to leave her behind. Don't ignore me. Where is my daughter? You said you would keep her safe. Why is she not home? Why? Victoria asked a lot of questions. She yelled and cursed, but her words entered one ear and came out through the other. The only thing I could hear was my heartbeat. I'd gone numb all over, and every time I blinked, I saw an image of my mate, alone and terrified, back where she started, in the arms of people I vowed to protect her from. Will you stop gnashing your teeth and answer me? I turned to the woman on the horse beside me. Her horse riding was even better than Jack's, but I said nothing. Speaking had become impossible as fear paralyzed my tongue. Goddess, I would do anything. Please, please keep her safe. Please. The silent prayer repeated in my head like a mantra. On the way, we encountered rogues, then witches. I took a hit here and there, but I was more focused on advancing. My mate. I had to find her, and when I found her, I realized how long I held my breath, how close I had come to losing her, and how much I wanted to hurt someone, kill someone. I belong beside you, she was saying as we returned to the capital. Earlier in the day, while she slept, I received word from Orion that Dark Moon, led by Hawk, started to attack the palace on a larger scale than expected. Bale had sent over people, but with the number of warriors involved in dealing with the rogues, we did not have many men on the ground, and it seemed Dark Moon came forward with every last one of her warriors. Amethyst, you have to be safe. Victoria and her coven could guarantee her safety. There's war at home, baby. Please stay with the coven for now. But it is our home. Her expression dropped and my heart ached, but I was unmoving. Styx did not want her to leave our side, considering we almost lost her just now, but it was not a wise decision to keep her shackled to me. Things were bad at the palace and could turn disastrous at any minute. Yes, it's our home, so I have to defend it. You have to stay safe, I coaxed. I knew she understood me as she nodded with tears in her eyes. Be safe, she mumbled, throwing her hands around me. If anything happens to you, she trailed off. Our hearts beat together, racing and hurting. I wanted to console her, to tell her nothing would happen to me, but I wasn't so sure. Hawk was meticulous with his games. In such a short time, he had wreaked so much havoc and was waiting to do more. No one would be surprised if I fell. We have a long life ahead of us, Killian. We don't even have kids yet, so you have to be safe. I nodded at the advice. We have to grow old together, surrounded by our family. You have to tell me you love me every day till I'm old and gray. Don't you dare leave me behind. She tightened her grip around my neck, and I crushed her body to mine. There are so many positions we have to try. I let out a short bark of laughter at those words. I'm serious. I know, baby. I hugged her tighter. We will do everything you want and more. Wait for me. She raised her head from my chest and stared at me through watery eyes. That's a promise. I sent her away with the warriors that followed me to Red Lake. Then I got on a horse and entered Bale's stronghold in the capital. How is the situation? I asked Alpha Bake, and he shook his head. It was terrible. In half a day, Hawk had subdued what was left of my warriors. The king's guards, as expected, were traitors. I thought I weeded them out, but I was not thorough enough. Dark Moon had insiders working with them, so they moved with ease. Orion? I asked about my beta, and Bale's face turned grim. They have him. I nodded at that response despite my constricted chest. How many warriors can I get from you? I asked Bale as I started to devise a plan. It took more than 48 hours for me to safely enter the palace in a disguise, and then I met Hawk. I've been waiting for you. He sat on my throne with a cup of wine in hand and a grin on his lips and at least 10 warriors surrounding him. I waited. I did. I waited because I knew I would be in his way. There was little I could do to aid my mate this time, so it was best to stay out of the way. So I waited. The first day came and went, as did the second, then the third until a week went by. At random intervals during the day and at night, I felt sharp stabs of pain, and as time went by, I learnt to ignore them. Sometimes I cried myself to sleep, and other times I woke up with my pillow soaked with tears, but I waited. It would be over soon. I hoped and prayed. He was alive, I could feel it, so it would be over soon, and we would be victorious. We had to be. Are you starving yourself again today? Cedric came in with lunch. No, it seemed to be dinner, considering the stars in the skies. Do you want to die before your mate? I heard a low cuss, and my eyes turned to the door. The person cussing left in a hurry, but not before I got a glimpse of Soleil's figure. When I first arrived at the coven, the women were ecstatic to have me, but their smiles slowly turned to frowns the longer I moped around. He is fighting so hard for your future while you starve yourself, Cedric snorted. He had a talent for offending people, I realized. When I got too deep in my thoughts, the coven sent Cedric and he poked at me until I exploded with rage. Today, despite his provocative words, I refused to be riled up. I didn't have the energy to be annoyed with him in the first place. Surprisingly, he didn't try to rile me up. Do you want to get out of here? He asked, and my brows shot up. We can pay your maid a surprise visit. It was a tempting idea. So tempting, I almost nodded on reflex, but I held myself. There was a reason for my stay here. Asides my safety, it was best to leave Killian to focus on the task at hand. If I could not fight alongside him, it was best to not distract him. Do you miss Eliza? I asked in a monotone, and he flinched. Although he wore my ears off about Eliza in the past, I never imagined he was actually serious about her, not until he started to look as awful as I did since this ordeal began. Whether Eliza or Jack, I did not know anything about anyone. I was cut off from the world, only hearing things from here and there. The only solid information I got was from the newspaper Cedric brought every morning. The papers talked about the tense situation in the kingdom, the return of the oracle, and the issue with Dark Moon, who had first declared themselves independent of the kingdom and was now trying to invade with the excuse of getting back their heir. Not unexpectedly, everyone believed the unrest in the palace was about Scarlet, since the public did not know of Grace's pregnancy. Hawke's groundwork in convincing people that Killian was nothing but a bastard born from a fraudulent lineage produced mixed results amongst the masses. People condemned Dark Moon, but a small sect of people believed, or wanted to believe, Killian was a fake experiencing retribution, and that Hawke was the savior of the kingdom. They even called the oracle a fake brought in by my mate and me. I pitied Serena. As a lot of people didn't know her, it seemed people believed her to be a fraud. That was as much as I got from the papers Cedric brought me every morning. "We were talking about you," Cedric said with a tight smile. "Don't ask me silly questions." With that, he stood, dusting his trousers. Pushing his hair back, he paused and opened his mouth to say something but ended up thinking better of it. When he exited the room, I flopped face into bed, ignoring the meal he brought in. I wasn't hungry. How could I be hungry when anxiety tightened my guts and filled my stomach? Thoughts of my mate filled me with dread, so there was no space for hunger. The different parts of my body hurt, and I wondered just how badly my mate was hurting. At times, anguish squeezed my heart, and I knew that it was not mine. My mate's emotions got so strong sometimes that they leaked into me. I spent the better parts of that night fighting and failing to hold back tears. Sleep, as usual, eluded me, so I prayed for my mate. I wasn't sure if the goddess heard or if she cared, but I called her a good number of times and prayed for my mate's safety. As the night dragged on, I heard murmurings coming from downstairs. The coven held nighttime meetings sometimes, and since it did not concern me, I did not bother with them. While I tossed in bed, I felt a sharp pain, as if a spear had pierced my chest. The pillow muffled my scream and took my tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I knew I promised my mate that I would stay away, that I would stay safe until all this blew over, but with every tick of the clock, I lost a piece of my mind and shortened my lifespan. I'm sorry. I was sorry, but I could no longer endure. Even if it was the last thing I did, I had to see my mate. The back door creaked as I opened it and let myself out. The women would stop me. I knew, but I did not want to be stopped. The roads were empty as I got out of the coven house and shifted. The moon and stars were the only light that night, and they were the only lights I needed. I felt something deep inside me waver, and then it seemed to die out. My wolf whimpered and howled silently as we ran until the moon faded and the sun started to rise. I thought it was by sheer luck that I managed to enter the palace, which was heavily guarded by men I did not recognize, but I later discovered otherwise. I entered in my trembling wolf form, and then I shifted back. Like a thief, I entered an unoccupied room and threw on the first clothes my hands came upon. They were a maid's uniform. I laughed quietly as I exited the room, but immediately, a hand grabbed me and pulled me into another room. "What the hell are you doing?" I raised petrified eyes to see Jack glaring down at me. In the week or so since I last saw her, she had turned haggard, rougher than I remembered, with alarming dark circles around her eyes. "Jack, Killian, my mate. Something has happened to my mate. And you have come to save him, have you?" she whispered harshly. "This place is crawling with enemies. Your neck would fly off in a split second if you are discovered." Her red eyes glared harshly at me. I was torn inside. I knew the dangers, but I could not find it in me to care. "I have to see Killian. Can you take me to him?" I asked Jack, whose nostrils flared. "Of course not. Do you think I'm a fool like you?" she hissed. "Go back. You cannot be here." As she spoke, a loud howl filled the palace, making the grounds rattle, and Jack hissed, "Stay here." I grabbed her before she could leave. What was that?" My nails bit into her skin, but she shook me off roughly. "Jacqueline," Kalea growled. "Goddess, this is not the time. This is so not the time." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "What is happening?" I demanded, and she sighed. "It's the sound of death, isn't it?" My blood ran cold. I suppose the battle for the throne would officially start now. What? I flinched when I heard a crash. You cannot be here. Look, everything is about to be tossed to hell. The hawk has since occupied the palace and has now issued a formal challenge for the throne. Is that? I did not even know what to ask. From the throbbing in my chest, it was clear my mate was still injured, and now a formal battle? I had heard stories about alphas challenging each other for the right to rule, and I knew this would be much worse than the stories I used to hear. Knowing Hawk, my mate's chances. This place is dangerous for you. We were both distracted, so we did not see them, and even if we did, it would have been too late to escape anyway. I expected you sooner, but it is fine since you are here anyway. Jack and I turned to see the beta of Dark Moon leading a group of unfamiliar warriors. He smiled, and his smile looked genuinely warm yet sinister. Jack went into defense mode, but the warriors around him subdued her in a few minutes as the beta dragged me away. Are you ready to give up? The beta was saying as his warriors dragged me towards the throne room. Aren't you tired? The Calestis family is about to fall, but if you cooperate, we may yet spare your mate. What do you want from me? I hissed, trying to free my hands from the iron grips or Dark Moon warriors. A simple surrender would do. Hand over the kingdom and all this would end. You know, your father is unwilling to lose you. After all, you are the precious daughter he only just met, and a hybrid one too. He gave me another warm smile that spooked me worse than Samuel's voice. The kingdom is not mine to hand over, I snarled at him, but he only shrugged. Your mate is unfit to handle the affairs of the kingdom, and you are the last surviving royal. He gave me a pointed look. What had they done to him? We haven't done much, but he is stubborn, so we will have to do something. But that is not the main point. We are interested in keeping you alive, so if you cooperate, we can let him live. All you have to do is surrender. It is as simple as that. Even till the end, Hawk was still looking for those he could use. Of course, if anything happened to Killian, the throne would not go to me. But he was the last of his lineage. There would be protests. Hawk could deceive a lot of people, but not all. If he kept me shackled to his side, he could use me as a shield. After all, I would remain the Luna Queen, or the Dowager. My skin tingled, and my hybridity, as my mother predicted. My father only saw tools, not people. Ah, you are here. I heard Hawk's voice, but my gaze was inexplicably drawn to my mate, whose expression went from blank to furious in the blink of an eye. This can end now, Hawk Beta whispered to me like the devil's advocate. My mate was in terrible shape, and they knew I would do anything to help out, but I was not a fool. If I surrendered on behalf of my mate, all of this would be over for us. What would it be, Amethyst? He was lying. I knew he was lying. The soft voice whispering to me was false, wrong. Despair almost had me nodding, agreeing with his terms so they would let my mate go, but he was the Alpha King, not I. Surrendering his seat was as good as declaring him dead, betraying him. So even though he had several bruises decorating his face, even though blood oozed from a deep wound in his chest, even though he had to fight over 20 wolves in this condition, I could not tap out on his behalf. As I watched with my eyes wide, unwilling to miss even the tiniest of his movement, he stomped hard on a wolf's shin, breaking its ankle. They fought in their human forms, but it was not any deadly than fighting in wolf form. The throne room, which was always decorated and pristine, was soaked in blood, bloody bodies here and there with more dropping as they attacked my mate. Hawk sat on the throne, my mate's throne, as he grinned at the whole thing. I knew they dragged me here to discourage me and force me to do as they said, but I hardened my heart, or I tried to, but it was difficult. Killian, although he held his own, was not faring well. My stomach rolled as a fist connected with his jaw, and blood sprayed everywhere. Even if as many as 5 warriors did not surround me, the horror and sharp pain of watching my mate get hurt would have frozen my feet to the ground. Would it end like my dream? Was it destiny? I could not move, and my mate was surrounded, fighting for his life, for our lives. Killian gritted his teeth as he continued to move. At this point, it would be best for him to shift, but the men came at him at an alarming speed, giving him no space to shift. Can you see there is no way for him to win? Hawk's beta muttered with a scoff, while Hawk watched my mate as if he was nothing but a slave fighting for his amusement. You can save him. Salvation. I bit my lips and Kalea whimpered. It was as tempting as water to a dehydrated man wandering in a desert. Tears gathered in my eyes as I bit my lips hard enough to draw blood. I would use my blood as a seal, hand over everything to Hawk, as long as he let my mate go. He was fighting alone, fighting traitors while his warriors were caught outside the palace. He was fighting alone. I would give anything. I wanted to give everything when he hissed in pain, staggering to the side. A scream lodged in my throat as he was shoved hard into a wall. Is the throne worth it? Is it more important than your mate's life? The devil whispered to me, and I shivered. Is your pride worth more than his life? His life was tied to the throne. There was no guarantee that we would survive if we surrendered. I wanted to believe that Hawk pressed for surrender because he was afraid, uncertain of his chance of winning against my mate, but he was not. He lounged on the throne and chuckled at intervals, uncaring. He only wanted to make things worse for my mate, humiliate him, and use me. If Killian was not my mate, I would be terrified of him. I would call him a beast, a monster, with the way he still managed to cut through the men in front of him despite his awful state. Bathed in blood, I could only watch as he cut through Darkmoon's warriors with a slight limp in his steps. He was angry, but aside from that anger, his tension and dread leaked into me, and I swallowed thickly. What should have been one-on-one combat with Hawk turned out to be an ambush. We were outnumbered, all his warriors trapped outside while Darkmoon's warriors attacked, but he held his own. While my eyes focused on my mate and my heart raced from my throat, a force like a tornado picked me from the ground and slammed me down. That force turned out to be Hawk's beta. It was the perfect distraction, I exclaimed in surprise and terror, my heart threatening to burst, and it threw my mate off balance. One of the standing warriors grabbed a sword and pierced him. Killian! It was impossible to stop myself from screaming out his name as I felt and watched the weapon tear into him. It was fun at first, but this is beginning to drag on. Hawk stood, and for the first time I noticed how well-dressed he was. He wore a flowing velvet robe embroidered with gold threads, and although there was no crown on his head, he carried himself with a kind of grace foreign to him. Do you want to stop, or shall we continue? Hawk looked down at my mate. You have challenged me to a duel, but you cannot even fight me. My mate asked with a grin, yanking the weapon out of him. Blood gushed out of his stomach, and I flinched while he grinned with bloodied teeth. Killian, I muttered his name, but if he heard me, he did not react. Whether I touch you or not, you are dead meat, Hawk said. What do you even have to fight for? A kingdom that hates you? Relinquish your rights to the throne already. If you are so confident that you can have it, then you should not shy away from fighting for it. Look at you, Hawk said, coming down the throne. You are as good as dead. He stopped in front of my restrained mate. I will give you a choice. His gaze cut to me. The throne or your mate? Choose one. Who are you to give the Alpha King options? Killian asked, and Hawk threw his head back as he laughed. His laughter died in his throat when the door flew open, the hardwood flying halfway across the room before it fell to the ground. I knew you were stupid enough to come here. I didn't know I would ever be as happy to hear Cedric's obnoxious voice as much as I did right then. Ah, a witch. Hawk seemed amused at Cedric's intervention. I prefer the term wizard, he shrugged. Congratulations. You have done enough to anger a coven, he said. Then he muttered a spell that spread thick smoke in the room and had all of us gagging. Killian took that as a cue, and I mirrored his movement. I pushed myself to my feet, focusing on the men around me. The beta had his gaze on me as I broke into a run, shifting as I went. Unwilling to let his hostage go, he came after me, shifting into his brown wolf. My mate had long since shifted, and he went for Hawk's throat. As Kalea dodged the steady attacks from the brown wolf, familiar faces started to troop into the throne room. There was Victoria, Soleil, Jack, even Samuel, and a dozen other women who I never learnt their names. The sudden influx of people distracted me for a split second, and I failed to dodge the incessant attacks from the brown wolf. Amethyst! It was Victoria's scream that startled me. I couldn't tell how she recognized my wolf, but she did, and her scream rent the air as a heavy weight slammed me to the ground. Kalea howled from the effect of the forceful slam. A brown wolf like a bear got atop me, pain splitting my back from how hard I'd been thrown. Kalea dug her claws into the brown wolf, but it did not flinch, focusing on ripping me open with its claws. I had come close to death a million times, had even been tossed out of a building before, but it was the first time I felt chills run down my spine and fear squeeze my heart as I stared death in the face. Certain death. As I struggled to get the weight off me, it was suddenly flung off. A black wolf moving with the speed of light tackled the brown wolf, and like a dream, its fangs sunk into the wolf's neck. The brown wolf struggled, its claws drawing blood from the black wolf, but the black wolf remained persistent, unrelenting. Hands pulled me from behind. Someone embraced me and cried out my name. Dark Moon's warriors flocked in, sparks flew as the witches fought with magic. Victoria hugged me and Soleil healed my injuries. The brown wolf managed to get the black wolf off, but not without losing a sizable chunk of its flesh. Then I heard it. It was the sound of paws hitting the ground. I couldn't explain why it stood out, considering the commotion, but it did. I staggered up, shoving Victoria away as a white wolf approached me. Amethyst, his wolf is familiar. I remembered Kalea's words the first time she met Hawk. The wolf snarled at me, the sound loud, louder than the shouts and growls around us. I cannot lose. That was how I interpreted the look in the wolf's eyes as it snarled again. Then it leapt at me. I readied myself, braced up for impact, but the impact never came. Amethyst, step aside! To my surprise and horror, Victoria jumped in front of me. Sparks flew as she cast a spell at the leaping wolf, but its momentum was too great. It was too much. It threw all its weight into that single move, and even if she was a powerful spirit mage, she was encased in bones and flesh, a human body that was nowhere close to withstanding a wolf's strength. Her magic hit the wolf square in the chest, but not before it shoved her, its front paws tearing into her skin. The momentum with which she hit the ground had her skidding far away and then slamming into a wall. There was silence, or maybe the ringing in my ear blocked off all other sounds. There was silence, but then a scream pierced through the silence. I was the one screaming, even though I did not know why. There was no blood on her, but there was no movement either. Rattled to my core, I took a step back, but my legs wobbled. A wolf dropped at my feet. I looked at Victoria and swallowed. Her neck was twisted at an unnatural angle, and the shoulder of her shirt had been ripped open. Her eyes were half opened but unseeing. My mouth opened on its own, and yet another scream rent the air. Soleil and another woman whose name I never learnt rushed to my mother. Something hit me. Someone called my name, but my eyes remained on Victoria. I could not tell what part of me hurt the most. There was another scream. My name, more sparks in the air, a loud bang, a low growl. None of these penetrated into my consciousness after I saw those eyes. When I blinked, there was a white wolf of death in front of me. A black wolf pulled it off me, and I laughed because I could and because I did not know what to do. Of course, as a wolf, the sound did not come out as a normal laugh. Was it a whine, a howl, a groan? I had to move. A white and black wolf danced in battle just inches away from me, so I had to move. Someone pushed me away, and I went like a sack of potatoes. The black wolf snapped its jaw around the white. The white kicked viciously, pushing the black wolf off, and they both fell backwards. There was a screeching sound as they got back on their feet and ran at each other. Then the sound of a collision. The crunch of bones, teeth ripping into flesh and claws digging harshly. The white wolf turned red with blood. A howl. Silence. Don't move. A hand pressed me back down as I lurched up with a gasp. I tried to ask why, but my throat did not work and my lips could not move. Darkness consumed me after that. Voices filtered into my ears at various intervals, but the darkness did not recede. "Don't move, damn it!" The same voice exclaimed as I escaped the darkness after a long time. Why? This time my throat worked, but my voice was hoarse and everything hurt. "Because you almost died, dimwit!" I turned my head to look at the man cursing at me. Cedric sat beside my bed with Eliza, his eyes red at the corners and his expression fierce. "Stay still and don't cause any trouble." "Killian," I muttered, ignoring his words and trying to move. This time, he did not try to stop me. He let me find out on my own that it was excruciatingly painful to move. I hissed in pain as sharp stabs and tiny little pinpricks drove into my back as I tried to move. "Your mate is stable," Eliza spoke as I flopped back into bed. Once he wakes, you will be back to full strength, but it is best to rest for now. In a nutshell, I felt like hell because my mate was currently feeling like hell, but thankfully he was alive. The others have gone into mourning, so your mate will have to heal on his own. Cedric muttered, and the events of the previous day or days played through my mind in slow motion from the point when Hawk's beta dragged me away from Jack to the point where my world went silent. Victoria. Cedric flinched as I murmured that name. I wanted to ask about her. I wanted to pretend, or at least hold out hope that she made it, that she was fine, that I had not lost the mother I only just met. Eliza held my hand. She squeezed. Cedric remained silent. The silence in the room choked me. Tears filled my eyes, and I made no move to wipe them. I could not even move my hand. The physician came, and my eyes were swollen and dripping nonstop. Harold gave me a tight smile, but I could not return it. "We are grateful to the goddess for your life," he said, "and the life of the Alpha King. His wolf is doing a marvelous job of patching him up." "When will he wake up?" I croaked out. "We cannot say for sure, but his recovery is astounding, so he should open his eyes soon," he responded. He did a thorough check that lasted almost an hour, and after that, he made a declaration that made me blink in surprise and denial. "Congratulations are in order." His tight smile loosened. "I have monitored you for the past week, and I must say the goddess really loves you. Or perhaps your child has passed through the 14 rivers the moon touches and decided he must stay." "What child?" I frowned, and his smile widened. "The child in your belly." He beamed, but I could not return his smile. I raised my heavy hand and touched my stomach. "That's impossible." I groped my flat stomach. Even if I knew nothing about pregnancies, I knew that all the hits I received in the past week were enough to terminate a pregnancy. "I'm not pregnant." "You are about 2 months along," Harold insisted. 2 months. That would be right after the protests about my barrenness. What time did I have to get pregnant? "So you are the reason I have been sleeping like a fool all this time," Kalea woke with a yawn. I knew I felt different, but a pup? If the pulse was faint, I would be unsure, but after reading your pulse, it's got to be around 2 months. I swallowed down a now familiar bout of nausea as I tried to sit again, and then I frowned. Wait a minute, since when did I begin to feel nauseous? Although it was not to an alarming degree, and the nausea always passed after a moment, it definitely was. There was definitely a chance that I was pregnant. Still, it seemed impossible. "Des, you are sure I am not suffering from a terminal disease?" I asked, and Harold laughed. "If you don't believe me, I will send for the physician specialized in pregnancy and birth." An hour later, a short woman with a wiry build entered the room I was resting in. After an examination that lasted less than 10 minutes, she nodded her head with a withered smile. "Congratulations, you are indeed expecting." "Expecting what?" I asked, and she laughed. "Well, a baby, of course." I opened my mouth, ready to argue with her, but I held myself. Alone in the room, I poked my stomach multiple times, but gently, of course, in case there was a possibility that I was indeed pregnant. How could I be pregnant and not know? "When did I get pregnant?" "That time in the office," Kalea supplied, and I flamed up from head to toe. He did release a good number. I blocked my wolf out before she mortified me to death. Eliza and Cedric were the only ones to visit me in the week I spent cooped up in a room. I asked of everything and everyone I could think of, and Eliza made sure to answer as much as she could, while Cedric remained silent. He only came to make sure my magic was stable and not to converse, he told me, so I never tried to initiate a conversation with him. Jack had joined Orion in cleaning up the rest of the rogues, which she abandoned when she heard of the situation at the palace. The members of the coven were mostly fine. Hawk was in the dungeons. Members of Dark Moon were joining other packs as fast as they could. Rumor had it my mate was dead, but we were hiding it. Everyone was apprehensive. After a week, I was able to get out of the room. The inexplicable sharp pains were gone, so my mate was in a better state. I had dressed and was preparing to pay him a visit when Eliza came with an enormous smile on her face. "The physician has sent for you. I heard His Majesty is awake." Tears gathered in my eyes, and I could not stop myself from running to my mate. "Killian," I choked out when I saw him. "You are fine." Although he looked far from fine, His eyes were open and his chest rose and fell as he breathed. A jagged scar cut through his brows and his skin was different shades of yellow and purple, but he was alive. Surprise. His voice was hoarse and his muscles did not move properly as he tried to smile. I almost went crazy missing you. I took the seat beside him, stopping myself from flying into his arms. Compared to Killian, I was in awesome shape. His left hand was not completely healed, so it could not be moved. Scars covered his shoulder, his chest, his lower belly. Hell, his entire exposed upper body was covered in scars, a lot of which looked too damaged to heal. "How are you feeling?" we asked at the same time and then chuckled together, or wheezed. Laughing proved difficult for him. "I am fine," he said, and I nodded, holding back tears. "Just a bit of discomfort here and there," he lied, and I continued to nod. Orion entered the room as I wiped the corners of my eyes as my mate tried to get his facial muscles to force a smile. Orion looked like a man holding up the skies with his bare hands, thin, haggard, pale skin, and miserably dull eyes. I learned that at one point Hawk locked him up, and upon his escape, he immediately went back to work. The first news that reached my ear was of Luna Grace, who was suffering from silver infection. Then Scarlet, who was also suffering the same and whose symptoms had gotten worse. Killian gave the instruction to put Grace, Scarlet, and Hawk in one cell. "I hate that he is still alive," I muttered. "Would you prefer him dead?" Killian asked. "No. Yes. Just, I thought." When I woke up to peace and quiet, I assumed the cause of the unrest was finally snuffed out. With Hawk and his beta gone, it was clear that Darkmoon lost, so their warriors retreated. "I will give you his head, but you should decide how it should be cut." "Because he is my father?" I asked, and he flinched. "For Victoria, for your mother." It was my turn to flinch. His words thinned out, and I was forced to think of the woman whose image kept flashing in my head while I tried to pretend all was well. My mother. For me, her coven pushed back the date for her burial. The last of her bloodline, I was to bury her. A week after my mate opened his eyes, she was laid to rest with the rest of her people, next to her parents in the family tomb. The witches had that. Already decided resting places. I felt empty inside, cold, lost, guilty. A scarred hand squeezed mine as I stared at a face that resembled mine. Her eyes were closed in death forever. The first time I saw what she really looked like was when her magic was released. I was told that her coven did all they could. Her sisters only just found her after years of searching, yet they lost her in the blink of an eye. My heart bled. I could not swallow as I choked. Even breathing became a problem. Killian held me, grounded me to reality, and I forced myself to look my mother in the face. She gave so much for me, and I never got to thank her. From the beginning, even before I knew her, she has sacrificed so much for me. Still, never once did I thank her. I never even asked her why she wore a fake face. As I stared into her cold face, I could imagine what I would look like in the future, what I would look like in death. I don't know if it was the right decision. I answered a question I refused to answer when she was alive. Still, I am thankful. I am because you sacrificed, again and again. The witches crooned incantations, sealed her body to remain fresh for years to come, sent her soul to the ancestral planes, and then her funeral was over. I did not have tears to cry. My blood did not flow right as she was buried, and long after we left her resting place, everything still felt like a dream I would soon wake from. People worked day and night to get the palace back to its original glory. My mate was attached to my side throughout the renovation of the palace. We worked together in a small room which had been converted to a makeshift office for the two of us. Orion and Eliza came and went, so we both knew each other's business. Killian was focused on damage control with the help of the Oracle and High Priest. If no one knew the Oracle, everyone knew the High Priest. His words were held as sacred, so when he spoke of the monarch's blessings, people listened. He was the High Priest. He did not lie. Other priests may lie, but he was the highest known figure in the temple, so people believed he would not lie. Several packs contributed their quota to clean up the mess left behind by the sudden rogue invasion. Wolves flocked to the palace to volunteer their help in renovating. Hawk remained in the dungeons and no one wreaked havoc. Darkmoon became an enemy of the kingdom. All land in the kingdom belonged to the kingdom, which belonged to the Alpha King. If Dark Moon did not belong in the kingdom, then they had no land. To avoid being exiled, their members ran to other packs, and their elders wept for forgiveness, but they had neither alpha nor beta, so their neighbors were quick to encroach. They had no warriors to man their borders. Hawk took almost all of them in his battle for the throne. I still didn't believe I was pregnant, and I still didn't feel pregnant, so I did not mention anything to Killian. It would be a disaster to raise his hope with the seemingly good news that a part of me refused to believe. While I went through all that was needed to clean our home, Samuel came for a visit. I learnt that he was Cedric's uncle, and one of the few wizards to have gotten involved with a wolf in his lifetime. "I've come to put out a formal request to join your pack," he said on that fateful day. "Is there any reason for that?" Like me, my mate was suspicious of the stranger and his abrupt request to join a wolf pack. "I would like to be the official mage of the Alpha Pack. Weren't you looking for a mage in the first place?" Samuel said with a blank expression that still came off as creepy somehow. "Why do you want to be the official mage of a wolf pack? Your kind has long since cut off all contact with wolves," Killian asked, but Samuel only shrugged. "Would you believe me if I said I am doing this to make history?" His gaze flicked to me and Killian huffed. "There is no need to be irritable. I am old enough to father her." "No, I don't believe you. Tell me what you want or leave," Killian growled, and the other man laughed. "I am doing this for your benefit, you know?" he said, his eerie, cold voice becoming quieter and thus creepier. "Long, long ago, when I was a young boy, I met this woman. She was as bright as the sun, and, well, I will spare you the details, but she was a wolf. I think of her from time to time, and I like to imagine what if. What if she wasn't a wolf? What if I damned all consequences and pursued that beautiful light as I craved?" He chuckled and chills went down my spine. I lurked in her shadows for over a year, but I never had the courage to pursue a forbidden love, so I let her go. That's a touching story, but it does not explain why you want to join my pack. While I felt my heart soften towards Samuel, Killian shut him down with cold words. "If you do not have a valid reason, then the answer is no. You cannot join." I looked at my mate in surprise. Joining hands with witches would be phenomenal. Magic was not something to be taken lightly, and having a mage would greatly benefit the Alpha Pack. The last pack that had a mage almost rivaled the Alpha Pack in the last century. I am doing this for my first love, for Victoria's daughter, and for the boy I used to be. You may be unable to tell because of my fabulous aging, but I am nowhere close to being young. When I sit and think of what could have been, I am filled with regret, so for the boy I used to be, I want to do this. He pursed his lips as if he had shared too much, but then he continued. For my young love, which never amounted to anything but furtive glances. For Victoria, who was my dear friend, I want to come out of hiding. If I had the courage then, I too may have had a hybrid daughter, or I may have been hunted with my family, but these are things I would never know because I never had the courage to try in the first place. You are certain this is the choice you want to make? I could exploit you worse than my ancestors did. Killian warned roughly, but the man just shrugged. Since we went into hiding, our population has decreased with each passing year. Our magic has wasted being buried in darkness, and our people have lived like fugitives. Besides, I am a shadow mage. I can disappear at any time if I dislike your treatment. But what about your coven? I asked, and he shrugged again. I have lived without a coven for over 2 decades. Although I tried to forget about the wolf I loved, I always felt something was missing, so I left my coven. I've been what your kind would call a lone wolf for 2 decades now. Although having a witch join our pack was tempting, Killian was suspicious of Samuel, so we put him on trial. He would use his magic for the benefit of the pack for 1 month, and if it was satisfactory, he could become a pack member. While we tried our best to restore things around the kingdom, the time came when we could no longer ignore the criminals in the dungeons. Scarlet almost killed her fellow inmates, and Killian did not want that to happen. Orion headlined the public sentencing 2 days later. Let us begin with the men who stole from us all, Alpha Fraser of the White Wolves and Alpha Elias of the Night Howlers. Orion proceeded to list all they had stolen before he announced the sentence. For the crimes of embezzlement and treason, Alpha Elias of Night Howlers and Alpha Fraser of White Wolves will go to the guillotine." There was a loud scream that started an uproar in the market square. "No, no, I did everything you asked. No. This is ridiculous. We will not stand for such nonsense," someone from Night Howlers exclaimed. A few people shouted in protest. The wolves murmured in surprise, while I continued to stare at the man forced to his knees in the middle of the square. Hawk held his head high despite being shackled and on his knees with scars decorating his exposed flesh. Scarlet must have done a number on him, seeing as his left eye was nowhere to be found. As if feeling my eyes on him, he turned to me, and I flinched. Looking at him made me remember the nights I spent crying for my family. I never got to spend time with my mother because of this man, and it was unfortunate that he was my father. When I looked at him, I remembered the many ways he threatened me and tried to bully me into silence, from when he said I would never have a Luna ceremony to when he tried deceiving me into surrendering my mate's throne. "No way! I object! I object!" Where is the proof? The Alpha King is a tyrant trying to bully Night Howlers into silence. Helen Elias's loud yells brought me back to the present. We will not stand for this. Her mate had joined hands with Fraser and Hawk to create a drug that turned wolves into rogues in as little as 3 days, just because they wanted to destabilize the kingdom under Killian and weaken his power. The existence of such a drug could not be broadcasted to the world to avoid horrifying the masses, or giving vile people ideas to act on. None of these people would ever know the extent of the wickedness of these men. "If you want to join your mate, then it is fine, but please don't interrupt me," Orion said to Helen, who was on the verge of tearing her hair out. After Elias's and Fraser's sentencing came Sylvia and Howard. No one really paid any attention to them since they were unknown, but while Sylvia was sentenced to 20 years in the dungeons, Howard went the way of Elias and Fraser for treason. Then came Grace. I watched Hawk as her crimes were read out. She was guilty of assault, treason, and even had a hand in embezzlement, but since she was pregnant, she could not be sentenced to the guillotine. Grace Howard has been confirmed pregnant, so her sentencing will be adjourned. She will live out the remaining days of her pregnancy under close watch. After Orion's announcement, people naturally turned to Hawk. It was not a secret that he was the father of Grace's child. People expected him to react, but his bruised face remained unchanged. As time went on, everyone moved on from watching him to see the rogue being dragged out. A rogue? I heard it as Scarlet Hawk. Did she become a rogue, really? For those concerned, this is Scarlet Hawk, who turned rogue after her trial. Since she has already been sentenced, she will be put to death as already decided, but she was brought here to show the goddess's wrath. This time, Hawk flinched as Orion spoke. As we all know, shameless people, also called Sylvester Hawk and his cohorts, came up with a lie to accuse the Alpha King of being a fraud. The murmurs around the town square increased. Because of the evil ploy by herself and her father, the goddess struck her with madness. "This is a bit theatric, isn't it?" Killian leaned over and whispered in my ears. Orion was rather excited to put this together. I was wondering if he was not tired. "He seems so energetic," I answered. Even though dark circles decorated his eyes, he did not speak like someone who had had to deal with a rebellion. He was taken hostage and locked up and starved. "This is the only way he can take revenge," Killian said. "She refused to repent of her evil ways, so she will die as a rogue." There was a sharp intake of breath. Her father and pack tried to throw the kingdom into disarray. They disregarded the will of the goddess, and this is her punishment. From then on, Scarlet became a person who went rogue because of her evil ways, not a daughter destroyed by her father to silence her. The woman whose beauty rivaled 100 ended up as nothing but a rogue sentenced to die in public for her sins and the sins of her father. Sylvester Hawk, an entire day would not be enough to list your evil. Orion glared at Hawk. Some people watched with bated breath as the once most powerful alpha in the kingdom was dragged forward like a sheep being led to the slaughter. Others pointed fingers at him and mumbled under their breath. Who knew Dark Moon could ever fall? Such a powerful man. Why did he become so greedy? I can't believe I ever thought a man like this was handsome. I always knew he was up to no good. A pretentious bastard. Someone spat in his face. There were people who believed Hawk had more power than the king and bar the throne. He really did have more influence than Killian at a point. Here was a man at the pinnacle of success a few weeks ago, now on his knees, his hair mated to his scalp, his eye gouged out and phlegm coating his cheek. The fall of such a mighty man was nothing short of a spectacle that everyone watched in excitement. First, we will start with the assassination of Alpha Prince Seth. It was like pouring kerosene into a weak fire. The crowd roared to life. No way. Didn't he die of a strange disease? He was murdered? But my brother who works in the palace said it was suicide. No one bothered lowering their voices as everyone shouted. Some even screamed, unable to express themselves clearly with words. Sylvester Hawk, you used a poison made by witches to kill the royal Alpha Prince Seth to fulfill your selfish gains. Do you plead guilty or not guilty? The screams died out in a split second. All eyes focused on Hawk, but he remained impassive. We will take your silence as an affirmation of guilt, Orion said with a derisive chuckle. Aside from that, you also slandered the royal family, fueled incitement against the monarchy, embezzled public funds, and capped off all your wrongdoings with rebellion against the throne. Treason is enough to have your head cut off, your corpse burned, and your remains thrown down the sewer with your name marked in all history books as an enemy of the kingdom. But the Alpha King has decided to lessen your sentence. My mate's lips rose in a chilling smile as everyone turned to him, including Hawk. I do not want him to die a painless death. That was the only thing I had to say about Hawk's sentence. I agree, my mate responded, and it was decided that he could not have the luxury of a quick death. Sylvester Hawk, rather than the death penalty, you will spend the rest of your days in the dungeons to repent of your sins. Orion pronounced. Just let me die, Hawk hissed through gritted teeth. Let me die. The people around him took several steps back as he screamed, yanking at the silver chains binding him as if he could tear them off. Let me die, you bastards. Are you not afraid? You think you can humiliate me, but do you know who I am? He continued to scream, his tone harsh. The people around him moved back a step at his sudden outburst. He continued to scream and yank at the chains binding him. I am Alpha Hawk of Dark Moon. You cannot win against me. You cannot win against me, so you better kill me while you have the chance to. Let me die. Hey, didn't you lose already? Murmurs broke out yet again as Hawk displayed savagely. Dark Moon owns this kingdom. You will see. I will not let this go. Let me die. He yelled, his veins staining and his hands bleeding as the silver cut into his skin. Have you seen such a proud criminal? It was about time for Dark Moon's collapse. Arrogant fellows. Hey, old man, shut up! A little girl yelled at Hawk, who kept on screaming. Let me die. His tone weakened as he looked at the little girl. She threw a handful of sand at him, and I smirked. It was satisfying to watch the fall of such a man. Hawk was someone who could stand up to the king, but now even a little child could curse at him, and her parents would laugh without fear. It was the end of a man whose power once reached the skies, but ended up at the bottom. On cue, kids started to throw things at Hawk. Since everything was decided, people started to leave. Others remained to watch the gory scene of a beheading, but I could not. Even thinking of such a gory scene made my stomach lurch. Are you okay? Killian asked as we arrived at the palace. You look unwell. Nausea made my stomach turn, and I held my breath to stop myself from throwing up as we entered our room. Amethyst, Killian called, but I ended up rushing away to throw up my lunch. Despite the mountain of work awaiting me, I squeezed out time to see Hawk. For a long time, I pondered how to clip his wings, how to bring him down from his high horse and see him suffer. Having him where I wanted him made my steps light and my body weightless. His gaze burned into me when I stopped in front of his dark cell, and I felt a sort of dark glee warm me from the inside. I wanted him to suffer more than he was suffering for as long as possible. I thought I hated my father. I thought I hated Scarlet Hawk, but this man taught me what hatred meant. Have you come to gloat? He croaked out, and I shrugged. Something like that, I responded, a smile creeping up my lips. This man had been the bane of my existence for a while, but now he was at my mercy. The power he flaunted in my face had crumbled. Dark Moon, his pride and joy, was under my feet. His daughter, who he held as a jewel, died a shameful death, and the woman he took in as his mistress would meet the same fate. Those who sided with him would ask, how high, if I asked them to jump? Everything had changed. Scars decorated my skin because of this man. My mate woke up crying at night because of this man. If I forgot everything, I would never forget the humiliation he subjected me to. I would never forget that he put my mate in danger. If I forgot everything, I would never forget how much I hated this man. Gloating is just one thing I came here to do. I am also here to see how you are doing. I had better things to do, more sinister plans to carry out. As my mate's father, I thought I would extend some courtesy to you. If I sentenced you to the guillotine like the rest, your remains would have been dumped in a sewer. A man of your status deserves more than that. He gritted his teeth but said nothing, so I continued. And your lover, she is carrying my mate's sibling, so I am keeping her alive. Do you not think that is enough reason to thank me? I may have failed, he started, ignoring my words. I may have failed, but one day your lineage will be seen as the fraud that it is. He hissed at me. Blessed by the goddess? You do not deserve the goddess' blessing. You are weak and incompetent. Dark Moon. Dark Moon does not exist anymore, I reminded him. Their beta died, their alpha was thrown in the dungeons, and their elders were part of a plan to secede, so they were traitors too. The entire pack would be wiped away in a few months. Dark Moon fell, and rightly so. Hawk was smart, but still foolish enough to throw all his weight into a battle for the throne. He would have won. He had the upper hand, but it ended in his downfall. I would be forever thankful for Victoria and her coven who intervened in time. Without them, I did not want to think of what would have happened. Your pack, which your ancestors nurtured since its inception, has been destroyed, and it is all your fault. As we spoke, the scramble for Dark Moon's resources already began. More powerful packs would take over their land, seize their resources, and wipe out the name Dark Moon. If you were not filled with greed, you may have enjoyed being on par with the Alpha King for the rest of your life, but you never learnt to be content, did you? He flinched, his battered face hardening, but he remained silent. I do not blame you. As my lineage was blessed, I suspect yours to have been cursed. Cursed with greed. Hawk would not be the first Alpha from Dark Moon that dreamt of taking the throne for himself, but he was the most brazen of them in all of history. Dark Moon had a penchant to feel superior, and my father let this one's bravado grow. Are you done gloating? He asked, and I laughed. This would be the last time we see face to face, so I thought I would come to say goodbye. Oh, by the way, what would you like your son to be called? He gritted his teeth and started to spit out curses. Hawk would cease to breathe in a few weeks, so his words only made me laugh. The drug he created to make rogues would be used against him in slow doses. I wanted him to lose his senses little by little. I made sure he watched as his daughter's head got lobbed off, and I made sure he knew his mistress would have a life after him. Nothing hurt more than an accomplice escaping judgment while you rot. When he went totally feral, hurting himself and trying to eat his flesh alone in his cell, then I would feed him the last of the drugs he had made, every last drop of it. Let him die of an overdose of the drug he wanted to use in ruining the lives of others. I left the dungeons with a chuckle and a spring in my steps. Things in the kingdom were far from perfect, but they were going my way for now. Dark Moon was under my control, and those scrambling for a piece of the cake called Dark Moon were trying to appeal to me. The Night Howler's pack was temporarily under Cordelia, who did not oppose my rule. Fraser's and Elias's resources now belonged to the monarchy, so our treasury was full. I should buy my mate a few pieces of jewelry. I ascended the throne without a lick of support and with very limited resources, but now things had turned. It took many hardships, many blows, and many scars on my mate and I, but we made it this far. We lost a lot, more than we could ever make up for, but I vowed to keep going. For the lives of warriors who sacrificed themselves for this kingdom, for me, for Victoria who had given her all for my mate, and for Seth who lost his life in vain. For the first time, I felt like I owed this kingdom. Lives had been lost to protect the monarchy, and I had to make sure their sacrifices would not be in vain. The next day, we held a memorial service for the many men who lost their lives either to rogues or to Dark Moon's warriors. My chest felt tight and my eyes stung as people sobbed around me. As a sign of respect to the dead, I joined in covering their graves. There were tears, loud wailing, and a woman with a bulging belly being held back as she attempted to bury herself with her mate. Losses had to be compensated. Trusts had to be set up for children who lost their fathers. We needed to recruit more warriors to make up for the dent in our defense. A lot of the warriors needed rehabilitation. Work piled up, but I worked with a light heart for the first time in a long time. The kingdom did not feel like a burden anymore, but a family I had to take care of as the head. My arms, especially the left one, ached when I returned to the palace after hours of covering graves. I was drying my hair after washing away the dirt sticking to my skin when my mate spoke. "You know, Harold says I am pregnant," she mumbled. "What?" I stopped drying my hair as I swerved to stare at my mate. She was twiddling her thumbs. "I said the same thing," she exclaimed with an awkward smile. While she stared at me without saying anything, I tried my best to make my brain function properly. "What do you mean? Pregnant? What?" My mouth dropped open and the towel in my hand fell to the ground. A baby? At that moment, I had a thought or a vision. It was of a little girl that looked just like my mate. Yeah, a baby. Things haven't been going great and well, I actually didn't believe it, so I didn't. She tried explaining herself, but I had gotten so deep into my dream of a baby that looked like my mate that her words did not enter my ears anymore. "Hey, wait." Before I knew it, she was in the air. "Killian!" She laughed out loud as she clutched my shoulder while I spun her in the air. "Hey, I'm sorry." "I am sorry." I lowered her to the ground as gently as I could. I got too excited. She laughed as I panicked from how gruffly I grabbed her and flung her around. "It's fine, I'm fine," she assured me, but my heart did not stop racing. "But how long?" I asked. "Well, I found out the day I opened my eyes and Harold said it's 2 months. She touched her stomach. I wanted to touch her stomach. 2 months. 2 months. I thought to myself and then sighed. We are lucky. A lot had gone wrong in 2 months, and from what little I knew about pregnancies, the earliest stages were usually the most dangerous. My mind flashed back to how she had been thrown, slashed, and beaten by Hawk and his men. I could have lost my mate and child. "It's a miracle," my mate agreed. "I'm still in awe. Actually, I am a bit skeptical. I feel maybe there is a mistake, you know? Maybe I am not actually pregnant, but I checked again yesterday, and the physician confirms that I am really pregnant. We have to be careful." I swallowed while thinking of making a donation to the temple. The goddess had been more than generous to me during this period. It was more than I could imagine. Having a child, a baby. Harold has set up a schedule for checkups, and he is preparing a menu. Killian. Are you crying? Her voice rose. I had not known I was crying until she exclaimed, I wiped my face. I just never dreamt of being this happy. She wrapped her hands around my waist and buried her face in my chest. "We are going to be parents," she mumbled, and I nodded, feeling tears slide down my cheeks. This time, I did not try to stop the tears. We stayed like that for a long time until her stomach growled and I had to feed her. The Council of Alphas had a meeting that evening, and while they debated who got what from Dark Moon, I debated baby names. What would I call my baby? What was my mate doing then? After the meeting, I had to finalize a few things concerning the renovation of the throne room, which Samuel was championing, but before that, I sent for Harold to know more about pregnancies. Although Amethyst did not have any symptoms yet, I wanted to prepare myself. Before Harold arrived, I jotted down some baby names. I hoped we had a girl. We could name her Amethyst. Little Amethyst. My heart raced, and I caught myself grinning in my empty office. A baby girl named Amethyst. I wanted that much more than I had ever wanted anything. A few days ago, Hawk was found dead in his cell after weeks of him trying to eat himself as he turned rogue. In the early hours of this morning, Luna Grace ended her life by repeatedly stabbing her throat with a fork until she bled out. That was after she spent the past week screaming and crying out her mate's name as if stuck in a nightmare. Although Luna Grace used to be an important figure in my life, I did not care about her passing. I touched my stomach, thinking of the child that could have been. My heart tightened, and I closed my eyes, shaking my head. The death of a pregnant woman felt like a bad omen to me, but I had to remind myself that I had no hand in her death. "What are you doing?" I sighed as my mate interrupted me for the 100th time that day as I tried to work. "What does it look like I am doing, Killian?" I asked with an eye roll. "It looks like you are working," he said, accusation ringing in his tone, and I sighed again. "Yes, I am working. Is there a problem with that?" "There is," he answered with a nod. "There is a problem. Why are you working?" "I am the Luna Queen, or have you forgotten?" I exclaimed, and he flinched, making my heart tighten with guilt, and then my eyes watered. "Why are you doing this to me?" I choked out. "Why are you treating me like an invalid? I just want to work a bit, or have you found yourself another Luna Queen? Are you trying to get rid of me?" Hey. He held me as I staggered up. "Be careful. Let me go." I wrenched myself away from his hold, and then I burst into tears. "Baby." Killian grabbed my hands, covering my face as I cried ugly tears. "This is why you should not be working," he said, and I shook my head. "Do you want me to live like a useless person who does nothing? Are you trying to replace me?" He sighed. "You are my true mate. Who would I replace you with?" he asked, holding my hands tighter as I tried to be free of his grasp. His words made too much sense, so I cried harder. My belly was still small at close to 5 months. Killian was worried. I was worried, but the physician and midwives scheduled for my delivery assured us that it was normal. Some women had a big tummy, while others did not. Pregnancy differed from person to person, they said, but my mate and I were not assured. He was constantly worried, and I was constantly crying. Every night, I had weird dreams that had me waking up in a pool of my sweat. I slept early one day, woke up from a nightmare alone in bed, and screamed so loudly that warriors broke into the room hoping to catch an intruder. My mate also came running. I don't think I would ever outlive that humiliation. "Come on, it's time for your nap." Killian steered me to bed while I planted my feet on the ground. "I am not a child," I yelled at him, but used to my sudden mood swings this past week, he barely flinched. "I know you are not a child, but you are carrying my child. Allow me to take care of you, please." He gave me a pleading look that I could not ignore, so I went to bed. I dreamt of a mischievous white wolf in my hour-long nap, then I woke up and checked the budgets. Even if Killian asked me to do nothing but rest, I could not. I felt restless, and most of the time when I was idle, I ended up imagining things that made me cry. "Amethyst." Killian entered the room, and I scrambled to hide the report I'd been reading. "Why won't you listen to me?" He caught me as I stashed the papers underneath my seat. "If you do not rest properly, how are you going to have the energy to push when the baby comes?" He gave me a pointed look. But I've been advised to exercise to get a bit of strength." I tried to defend, guilt warming my insides, but he glared at me, grabbing the documents I tried concealing. "You have been through hard times since the start of this pregnancy. You should first relax before you think of exercising or anything like that," he concluded. "Eliza and Orion will deal with this, so rest a bit more." He carried me to the bed and laid me down, placing a soft kiss on my forehead and urging me to sleep. But I just woke up, so how could I sleep? "I am not sleepy," I said, and he pursed his lips. "Can I read a book at least? Or we could choose baby names together." I gave him a hopeful look. Since Killian found out I was pregnant, he had all but forbidden me from doing anything asides existing, but when I talked about baby names, he lit up like a Christmas tree and spoke energetically. "We already settled on names. Amethyst is a beautiful name," he said, but I shook my head. No way. While the royal family had a habit of naming their children after themselves, I did not want that. Amethyst was a name I admired after being called Carrot all my life, but it was not a name I wanted to pass on to my child. "I don't like that name." I shook my head and Killian's shoulders dropped. To me, it is a nice name, a name I admired, but I admired it because it was different from the name I was called, and that's why it became special to me. Although I am grateful to not be called Carrot anymore, Amethyst is not a name I want for our daughter. "That's unfortunate," Killian said with pouted lips. "I have looked up hundreds of names, but I still think a little girl who looks like you called Amethyst would be the cutest. But I am not cute. A child that looks like you would be ideal. You are, after all, the most handsome person in the kingdom." He laughed at my flattery. But that's assuming we have a daughter. What if it's a boy? I would love a son who looks like you. No, it's a girl. It has to be. He insisted and I laughed. A girl that looks like the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. That's what I want. That's what I pray for. I was fine with either, as long as I had a healthy baby. So while Killian prayed and hoped for a daughter, I prayed and hoped that my baby and I made it out safely from the delivery room. Many times I had caught my mate reading up about the delivery, and although he was bursting with excitement at the prospect of being a father, I did not miss his anxiety. The way he looked at my belly sometimes and swallowed, how he crossed his fingers and muttered Short's prayers. The nights when he whispered to me that I would be fine, seeming to reassure me but ultimately reassuring himself. He was scared. Childbirth was a scary thing, especially for someone who lost his mother from complications at birth. I too was scared, terrified out of my mind at the sudden changes. One minute I was fine and the next I felt the world collapsing around me. Despite how much I tried not to, I found myself snapping at people more and more. My emotions were running away from me, and watching my stomach swell with each passing day filled me with excitement and dread at the same time. If it's a girl, what do you think of Victoria? The silence that followed was loud. That is a wonderful name, my mate conceded. Since I lost my mother, I never mentioned her name. It felt too heavy on my tongue, like a name I was not qualified to speak. I had many regrets in life, but my biggest regret was how I treated my mother. I should have called her mother more often. I should have embraced her and had tea with her, eaten desserts with her, and made a pie with her. There were a lot of things I used to dream of doing with my mother, but I never got to do them. I missed Victoria. I wished I could turn back time and tell her how important she was to me, thank her for all she did for me even before I met her. The security she provided me with, and the foresight she had in hiding me. I should have thanked her, hugged her, and thanked her, but it was too late. My mother was gone. My eyes watered, and Killian hugged me. Victoria is a nice name. It's a good name. We'll call her Victoria, he comforted me as I sobbed into his shoulder. I am so sorry, I wailed into his shirt, and he nodded, hugging me tighter, our hearts beating as one. Killian, the baby is here, I screamed, startling my mate. What? His eyes widened and his fingers paused, buttoning his shirt. Where is she? It was a funny question, but I did not have time to laugh, so I swallowed thickly and tried to waddle to the delivery room next door. Hey, where are you going? He ended up carrying me there. I had been warned beforehand, taught breathing techniques and everything the midwives considered necessary for me to know before my labor began, but the pain was out of this world. Everything from my head to my toe hurt. My head felt like it was about to split in half, while my toes seemed to be getting shaved off, but my lower belly, I could not describe the pain. You are doing good, the midwife in charge said. Take a deep breath as we practiced. She was saying, but my ears rang. Take a deep what? It feels like I am being split open. I exclaimed, tears dripping into my ears as I gasped. The excruciating pain continued for hours. It was so long and so terrible that I felt myself on the verge of passing out at least 3 times, and in the end I was rewarded with a tiny cry that made all the hours of pain fade. But only for a while. He is pretty. My mate grinned as he held our baby, and my heart swelled with so much love I feared it would burst. He looks like you, I responded. Despite the insane fatigue weighing down on me, just looking at my mate and the baby we made filled my heart with unfathomable joy. Yes, it's amazing. Killian grinned. He wanted a daughter that looked like me but got a son that looked like him. However, there was no trace of disappointment in his gaze as he rocked the sleeping baby with a smile that lit up his entire face. You are amazing. He leaned over and placed a kiss on my forehead. You should sleep, he said, and I sighed. Who knew his overprotectiveness would not ease up even after I had the baby? Baby Seth was 1 day old, and he did nothing but sleep for the most part. He ate so little that I was afraid he might starve, but the nurse assured me he was eating the right quantity. Eating negligible quantities meant he ate often, and although he only woke up once during the night, I still had to feed him at intervals. Every time I woke up at night, I caught my mate staring at him with intrigue in his eyes. Seth was a calm baby. He barely cried, always slept, and ate well. As time went on, we settled into a rhythm. Things were much different from how they were in the past, but I did not want them to be any different. Seth was with Killian more than half of the time. Even when he went to meetings, he would take the baby around and show him to everyone that cared to see him, and most people wanted to see him. After the ill fate that hit our kingdom 7 months ago, we spent time rebuilding. My mate's rule was not solid in the first place, and to have a shock like Hawk's was exhausting. Dark Moon's land ended up being split into 6, and there was a tough battle for it. Helen Elias was also arrested when she tried to cause trouble following her mate's execution. Killian had to work overtime to ensure the drug used to turn people rogue was destroyed from the root. Everyone involved met an awful fate, and he had to do all this secretly. There was unrest and a bit of apprehension in the air, but thankfully the temple helped out a lot. Serena continued her travels, and as things gradually stabilized, people returned to their normal lives without fear of anyone toppling the monarchy or a civil war breaking out. After all this, everyone was excited to witness the birth of a little prince. A child signified hope for the future and an heir to succeed. Killian put people's minds to rest about the continuity of the monarchy, so Seth was not just a gift to us, but a gift to the entire kingdom. A gift Killian liked to showcase and everyone liked to coo at. Luna Cordelia visited when Seth was a few months old, and she cried ugly tears. It got worse when Seth did not allow her to touch him. He was a quiet baby, but he was selective of who held him. If it was not his father or mother, he did not like being held by strangers, but Cordelia took this to heart and apologized profusely. When we named him Seth, it was in remembrance of the only family Killian ever had before I came along, but Cordelia seemed to think it was for her. She begged for my baby's forgiveness to the point where I got uncomfortable and walked away with him. He may be named Seth, but it did not mean he was a reincarnation of her son, like she claimed. Seth grew well, and sometime along the line he went from my quiet baby to a baby that spiked my blood pressure every hour. No, do not put that in your mouth. I grabbed a button, which my son had been trying to swallow. Seth, this isn't edible. I chastised, but he looked at me blankly before moving on, crawling away on his chubby legs and arms. Seth! A few minutes later, I caught him trying to shove something else into his mouth. No, don't go there. He crawled underneath the bed, giggling as I exclaimed. When he started to crawl, he tried to go everywhere, but when he started to wobble on his feet, he really did go everywhere. Seth? Baby, where are you? I heard loud giggles coming from the wardrobe, and I caught my son spreading ink everywhere. How did he even get his hands on ink? I never found out. Where's Seth? Those were my mate's first words every time he returned from the Emerald Annex. Any trouble today? He asked as he kissed my cheek. Dada! Seth wobbled out from underneath my chair and hugged his father's legs. Killian lifted him off the ground and kissed his chubby cheeks while the little boy giggled. He is too much like you, I sighed when Seth started to babble to his father. I was a gentle child, so he must take after you. Is that right? Are you just like your dada? Rather than take me seriously, Killian tickled his sides and the little boy squealed loudly, dancing this way and that. Did you keep Mama busy while Dada worked? The child continued to squeal. I could not help the smile that graced my face as they both laughed. My family. For the most part of my life, I could only dream of a family, and now my dream had become a reality. I had a mate and a little pup of my own. It was like a dream, the best dream I ever had. Watching my mate and son play filled a part of my heart that I never noticed was empty. I would trade the world for these two people. After living life alone for 2 decades, having these two was the best thing that had ever happened to me. As Seth grew, I marveled at how much he looked like his father. At 4, looking at him felt like looking at the child version of my mate. It didn't help that he started to do everything his father did. He chose to match his clothes with his father, do his hair like his father, and eat whatever his father was having. It would not be an exaggeration to say that Seth worshipped his father. Mama, I want a baby, he said one day while we had breakfast. I want a baby like Aunt Eliza. Seth, you can't have a baby, I said, just as his father responded. You want a little sister? He shook his head vigorously. No. A baby. A baby like Aunt Eliza had last week. A baby like that. I want my own. Killian and I shared a look before bursting into laughter. It took him 2 years, but, surprisingly, Cedric managed to catch Eliza's eye. I felt a bit of relief and apprehension when Eliza announced Cedric would be joining her pack. The Alpha Pack was the only pack with a wizard and a witch after Soleil and Samuel joined. Things would truly change if witches began to tie themselves to wolf packs, and it was a change long overdue. I was relieved since Cedric would stop bothering me to help him with Eliza, and apprehensive because of the hybrid hunters. Older covens still insisted on witches maintaining their distance from wolves. Although more witches came out of hiding, hybrids were still a sensitive issue, and I had to live my life being cautious of going outside because of said hunters. "Mama, when will I get a baby?" Seth asked me the next day. "Mama, baby," and the next, "Mama, I made this for baby." Seth insisted on having a baby, so we gave him one. "Seth, Mama and Dada have something for you," Killian and I said to Seth one day. "Is it a baby?" he asked with wide eyes. "Yeah," I smiled at the little boy and his eyes lit up. "Really? There's a baby? Where my baby?" He looked around, jumped up, and circled us as if we were hiding a baby behind us. "Where?" "In here." I pointed at my belly and he frowned. "In the tummy?" I nodded and his eyes watered almost instantly. How easily tears gathered in children's eyes always filled me with wonder. "Mama, lying is bad." I winced as he exclaimed, stamping his feet. "No, Mama is telling the truth. There's a baby in there." I was just a little over 3 months, but unlike my pregnancy with Seth, where my stomach remained small, my tummy was already pronounced. "How did the baby get in there?" He poked my belly. No way. Did you eat my baby?" No matter how much I tried explaining to Seth, he insisted I ate his baby, and from then on, he told everyone, "Mama ate my baby, that's why her belly is so big." And when Victoria was born, he called her Poop for a while because I pooped her out. "She's ugly." He pinched her cheeks, and on cue, Victoria started to scream. Unlike Seth, Victoria cried a lot. Kept her father and I sleep-deprived for many nights, and because her father and brother spoiled her, she had a meltdown over every little thing. Thankfully, she did not try to eat everything she saw because Seth monitored her like a hawk, and she could not sneak off to hide anywhere because Seth followed her like a shadow. "Are you set, baby?" Killian asked me as we readied to leave for a short family vacation. No matter how much work we had or what was going on in the kingdom, Killian and I made sure to spend time away from the palace to create fun memories for the kids. Family time was something both of us never had since we had no families, so we wanted to give our kids the experiences we never had. Spending time with my family was one of the most rewarding things ever. Seeing my kids laugh as they ran around, hearing their giggles, and watching their eyes light up when it was time for a vacation made me feel a deep sense of achievement. "I am," Victoria answered for me while holding my hand. Victoria did not know her name was Victoria. Everyone called her Baby, so every time she heard baby, she turned, but before her, I was Baby. When we got to the villa we used for our vacation, it was just as usual. We were the only ones there, so after a quick rest, we went to the beach. Killian and I shifted, and the kids climbed all over us, laughing and screaming. Victoria was 3, and at an age of mischief, so she tried to run to the water alone, but Seth caught her before we even moved. As time went on, fatigue set in, and we had to go to bed. The kids crawled into bed between us, and they went out like a light, Victoria wrapping her little arms around her dad's bicep as she slept. Seth pretended to be mature and slept on his own, but he ended up inching closer to me as the night deepened. "Are you asleep?" my mate murmured, and I shook my head. I felt too full to sleep. My heart was bursting with love and happiness. "Shall we take a walk by the beach?" "The kids?" I asked, watching as Seth's brows furrowed in sleep. "They are tired. They won't open their eyes until noon tomorrow." He pried Victoria's arms open, and she instantly turned to cuddle her brother. My lips lifted at the sides as Seth turned and also held on to his sister, the two of them clutching each other. "Come on." Killian offered me his hand, and I took it without hesitation. The moon was bright in the sky, and our wolves were content. I raised my head to the moon and took a deep breath, feeling calmness wash over me. My mate's grip tightened as we walked hand in hand to the beach and then sat down a few feet away from the water. I wish we could stay here forever, I muttered, lifting my head to the moon again. It's so beautiful, so peaceful, and the kids love it. When he said nothing, I turned to him and caught him staring at me with hooded eyes. What? I asked, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Have I ever told you that you are like my fountain of good fortune? He asked. Feeling sentimental, I asked, and he nodded. Very sentimental. I looked at Seth and Victoria today and I could not believe it. As I have told you, most things in my life always go wrong. A family is something I dreamt of but always thought I would never have. I never imagined my life would ever be this good. Me too, I admitted. I had dreams, but even my dreams were not as good as my current reality. He put his hand around my shoulder and pulled me close. As I wrapped a hand around his waist, I listened to his heart as it echoed the rhythm of my heart. Every day, I am scared. I wonder if things are too good to be true. I would give anything to preserve the happiness we have now. What we have, it's the most beautiful things. So beautiful, I fear it may turn out to be an illusion, he mumbled. It's not, I refuted. It's not an illusion. I rested my head on his shoulder. Who would have thought we would go from where we were to where we are? I remember you said not to fall in love with you. We both chuckled. How stupid I was, he shook his head. A lot had changed in the 9 years since we first got together. How stupid we were, I confirmed, and we laughed again. The evening breeze blew into my face, and I inhaled slowly, closing my eyes for a second to savor the joy of the moment. I know I have said it before, but thank you. Thank you for giving me a family. He kissed my knuckles. I cannot remember how I lived without you by my side. It must have been hell. Must have been awful, I joked. It was worse than awful. Navigating life alone was the worst. Having you beside me changed everything, and I am grateful and glad for everything you have given me. I'm grateful too, I muttered. You have given me all I ever wanted, and then some more. Who would have thought the unnamed girl from Red Lake would be here today, sitting beside a man like Killian? You are the best thing to ever happen to me, he said, and it was the same for me. Thank you for crawling into my carriage. We burst into laughter at that. Casting my mind back, I thought back to how far we had come. The life I had now was unimaginable to the carrot that lived as Red Lake's maid. There were times when I was frustrated, times when I cried, times when I questioned my relationship with him, but those times were incomparable to the times he made me laugh, stood by me, and made sure to support me. He'd become a rock I never knew I needed. Used to living life alone, fighting my battles alone, Killian came and took all that from me. He said I would never need to dirty my hands, and he kept true to his words. This man would do anything for me. I love you, I muttered to him, to my everything, forever. Even in my next life, I will love you. He massaged my neck, and I lifted my head. His lips descended on mine, and my eyes fluttered closed. I got lost in the feel of his lips on mine, his hand on my waist, and his breath on my face. His body warmed me in the cold of the night, and his hand slipped under my shirt. Mama! You meanie! You stole my daddy in my sleep! My eyes snapped open as I heard Victoria's high-pitched shriek. My mate turned in time to catch out bundles of joy running towards us. My little girl's face planted as she ran, and we laughed as the first snow of the year fell.